Good morning, this is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to season 3 and episode number 339 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show here on the Crier Media Network. Yeah. Today, recording day is Friday, March 15th, 2024. It's a beautiful day here at the Beaver Lodge. And we have got a great show planned for you today, kits and cubs. Very excited about this one. I'm your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A. And with me, as always, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. A big thank you goes to our podcast's founding sponsors, the Peppermaster, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and CanadianTarot.com. But before we do anything else, let's say hello to you, Mr. Grizzly, and ask how is your mental health doing today, sir?
Well, sir, I think I'm okay. I just think I'm okay because I am not at all awake yet. I slept in a little bit. Normally, wake up at 5, crawl out of bed at 6, log onto the computer, start to write some stuff, put this together, get some ideas, send out the links, and I'm good to go. This morning, I didn't get out of bed till 6:30. And even then, I'm like, oh, God, I'm just so tired. Oh, my lovely wife is bringing me a cup of coffee. Oh, what an angel. Oh, God, this is going to be so good. Just a second. Let me just. Oh, there we go. That's the nectar of life right there, my friends. I'll tell you that. That is what gives me a reason to stay alive every day. Coffee. Well, not really, but it helps. So, how are you, sir? How are you feeling? How was your night? Did you sleep? You look full of piss and vinegar this morning. You look like you're full of piss and vinegar. So I'm assuming you got a good night's sleep.
I'm feeling good. I'm sorry if anybody was hearing some double there. There was something running in the background
No,
there
we're
for a
good.
minute.
We're good.
Okay. I am doing well. I actually woke up about 5 minutes before the alarm.
Okay.
Yeah, and bright and fresh, as opposed to the last 2 mornings where I was sort of like, oh boy, that alarm came quick.
Well, yesterday
So yeah,
it's horrible migraine, so I was kind of quiet and just trying to do some stuff in the background. Today, I have no migraine. I'm just not awake.
all right. No, feeling absolutely great. Got a great night's sleep, all the good stuff. So yeah, I am raring to go. And plus, well, I've been excited because we have a guest joining us. Well, we have a couple of guests joining us, but we have. But we do have a guest joining us that we had been looking forward to because we promised earlier in the week that we would make an effort to reach out to him, and we have, and he has agreed to show up on our show. So we will have that, and we will talk a little bit about what it's like to be at a Pierre Poilievre rally.
Yes. What it's like to attend a Pierre Poilievre rally for someone who was
well,
there.
actually, what it's like to be at a Pierre Poilievre rally if you happen to have something to say.
And how much he lets you speak.
Yes, indeed.
The paragon of freedom of speech, free. I'll make Canada the freest country in the world. No more gatekeepers, bloody, bloody, bloody. I don't like what you have to say. Get out of my rally.
Pretty much.
Yeah, he's such a little shit gibbon, that little punk. Oh, man, I hate that guy so much. I really do. I really cannot stand Pierre Polyev in any way, shape, or form. He's just a horrible human being. In case anybody didn't already know that, I'm just sharing that with you now. If you're learning this for the first time today.
Oh, well. So why don't we just get into it?
Yeah,
That might
absolutely.
be the best thing to do at this moment. Our guest, ladies and gentlemen, and for some reason, everything has just disappeared from my screen for some
gathered
reason.
that. Yeah, I gathered that. And I'm like, you're kind of struggling a little bit, so there must be an issue.
I
It
definitely am struggling for some reason.
That happens, it's nothing.
But our guest today is someone who has worked on climate change as a teacher, a researcher, and an advocate for over 30 years, the last 14 of them with Greenpeace Canada. He has a PhD in political science and teaches a third-year course on energy and environmental policy at the University of Toronto. We spoke about him earlier this week because he was at a Pierre Poilievre rally and seemed to have been escorted out rather unceremoniously. And from the images that we saw at the time, it seemed that police officers were involved, which made us wonder why it is that someone who appeared to have something to say but was not violent or threatening in any way needed to have police officers put hands on him, and why it is or how it is that the Conservative Party of Canada has police officers participating in doing their security work.
They had mounted police outside the venue as well.
Yes, and why all of that was needed and how those arrangements were made, because that's a little, as the kids today would say, sus. So,
yes, sus.
Yeah,
Is this
slightly
supposed to be suspect, or is that what it means when
suspect
I hear
or
it?
suspicious?
Okay.
Yes. So, without any further ado, kids and cubs, please put your paws up and give a big round of applause for Mr. Keith Stewart. Welcome to the Beaver Lodge, good sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining us.
It's lovely to have you on. As we do for all our guests, we also ask them, how's your mental health doing today?
I'm just peachy today.
Excellent.
Got up nice and early. I've walked the dog, had my coffee. I'm good to go.
I haven't walked my dog yet. Because Fridays we go on for a couple hours usually. I'm going to have to take her out mid-show at some point, I think, because she's starting to do that little, Daddy, I gotta pee dance,
I'm familiar.
Yes. So, Keith, tell us, before the incident started, what motivated you to want to attend the rally in the first place? Because clearly it's not going to be a place where people are going to be the most happy to see you.
No, so I kind of feel like Pierre Poilievre has been given a free ride. He gets to set the agenda. He gets to talk about the things he wants to talk about and doesn't talk about the things he doesn't want to talk about.
Yeah.
And I think he should have to say what his plan is for action on climate change. He's holding all these axe to tax rallies to say what he wouldn't do, but what would he do? I only found out about this rally like late on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So I just popped by the Greenpeace office. I grabbed one of our banners. It says "Act on Climate Now."
Oh my God, that's so offensive.
I grabbed my 19-year-old son. Said, "Hey, want to come with me?" He was into it. I think he actually thought it was more like it would be for him. I think it was like, oh, it's like one of those video games I play. We're gonna like sneak in. We're gonna do a mission. We ended up in the back of a police van, which is perhaps more exciting police car, probably perhaps more exciting than expected.
Mm-hmm.
But really, I just wanted to. Every person who walked into that rally, and on every chair there was a sign "Axe to Tax."
Right.
And so I thought, hey, everyone's being invited to wave signs. So I didn't jump on the stage. I didn't yell anything. I just sort of moved to a clear area and like held up a sign that says "Act on Climate Now." because I knew it wasn't going to be a terribly friendly crowd, but I do think actually there's people there who do care about their kids. They care about their community. Some of them probably recognize climate change is a major problem. A lot of them, however, people have been lied to for decades by oil companies, by politicians. I think you guys saw my tweet that got 2,200 replies, most of which were telling me that climate change isn't real and wildfires are all started by environmentalists. But I do think we have to challenge Polyev on his own ground rather than letting him, pick all of his venues and choose whether or not he answers questions. So I wanted to go out there and try and raise this banner, and I got basically tackled. So it was interesting that this champion of free speech won't let you hold up an unapproved sign. Everyone got to hold up signs. Like, it's not like holding up a sign was not allowed. Everyone was in fact given a sign to hold up, but unless you hold up the approved sign, you were grabbed by private security, hauled off to the side. Like, I was just trying to stay on my feet as the guy pulled me off, and then passed to police and, taken out and put in the back of a police car and sort of say, okay, we're holding you for, it was originally going to be mischief to property. And then they sort of like realized what had happened. And the police were like, oh, I think they assumed that the police seemed to think that I must have done something like charge the stage or something. Because when I explained that I only held up a sign and we actually showed them a little video of what happened, they were like, oh, and they were like, okay, you can go. Although the police had to go back in and find my keys, which had been knocked out of my pocket.
Because he tackled the security person, I guess, kind of basically tackled you. Huh?
Yeah, just like, and I've been to lots of events like this. And normally you hold up a sign and they come over and say, please leave. Or often they'll sort of like give you, if you're not like kind of like yelling, they'll like they'll let you hold up the sign for a few moments and say, okay, you've got to say your piece.
You've had your moment,
like I just heard, I like started to like hold up the sign and I just heard this, oh no, you don't. And I get grabbed and sort of like hauled off. Like sort of, he was like picking me up and then dropping me down over like one step and then another and then another. It was like this well-practiced move. And I was kind of wishing I hadn't lost all that weight after the pandemic. Had so much time and effort, because it would have been a little harder for him if I was still that few extra pounds. The 145 pounds of me is not that difficult to move. But it was fascinating to watch, like, okay, what does free speech mean at these types of events? You say what you're allowed to say, you chant you could chant fuck Trudeau
and they'd be
to your heart's content. You could wear fuck Trudeau t-shirts and you were like applauded for that. Say act on climate change,
you're gone,
tossed out of the room, literally.
Interesting.
Well, and here's the thing about this. It's like, we have been saying how much of an absolute shit-kibbing Pierre Poilievre is since we started this show. Even long before he was leader. Now that he's the LOL, loyal opposition leader, and I do that intentionally.
No, he's the Lou, leader of the official opposition.
No, he's the LOL.
Okay. Sure,
loyal opposition leader. I changed it intentionally because we all know LOL means laughing out loud, and he's a joke. But the problem is, he's a joke that if he ever ascends to the position of prime minister, we're in deep shit, because this guy is a fascist dictator, as evidenced by what happened to Mr. Stewart here, holding up a simple sign that just says act on climate change. Not fuck Poilievre, not you're burning us, not nothing vulgar, nothing rude, nothing outlandish, nothing false.
Nothing threatening.
Nothing threatening. Just act on climate change. That's it. And what happened? You got tackled, escorted out, handed off to police. That seems like a little bit right out of the Goebbels fascist playbook, if you ask me. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not that smart. But it is definitely the furthest thing from non-gatekeeping free speech. That little shit Gibbon keeps going on. He's going to make us the freest country in the world, and he's going to get rid of the gatekeepers, and we're going to be free and freedom of speech. And again, freedom of speech is not a thing in Canada. We have freedom of expression, and you were expressing your thoughts and feelings, and were tackled and taken out of the game for doing so. So anybody, anywhere watching this needs to know what Pierre Poilievre government will look like you just witnessed it, and Keith here was on the receiving end of it.
Mr. Grizzly, I think we have a little bit of video that Keith has shared with us.
Yeah, clip to you?
Yep. I sent it to you by email.
Oh, by email. Okay, I was looking for it in the
Because,
chat.
I believe it was your son who got the video, right, Keith?
Yeah.
Okay. Up until that moment, up until the time that you unfurled the banner, what was, because I'm sure you didn't just get in, the rally started 2 minutes in and then you got up. I'm sure you let it go for a little bit. What was it like? What was the mood like? What was being said?
Opening speech, I think, by Melissa Lantzman.
Sorry, we missed the beginning of that.
There was an opening little speech. I think it was by Melissa Lantzman, who's deputy leader. Not absolutely certain on that because I couldn't actually get a really good look. Then there was actually a speech by Poilievre's wife, which was actually, I mean, the thing is, it's a really good speech. Expressing empathy for people who are struggling and concerns. And this is one of the things that drives me crazy is if they're mentioning, oh, the carbon tax is going to drive up the cost of everything, but they forget the fact that there's a carbon tax rebate. So 80%, unless you're in the top 20% of income, you get more money back than you pay in. So actually having a carbon tax helps you with your groceries and everything else. The other thing was there's this concern over, our kids, our future, but what they're completely ignoring is the impact of climate change is going to have on. I mean, I don't want my son growing up in a world of unending climate disasters, and we need to. That's why I'm saying we need to take action. But the speeches actually are incredibly well crafted. They're emotional. They connect. Poilievre, I mean, to be honest, his wife was better than Poilievre. She's a better speaker, I think.
He has a personality.
But he was also pretty good. I mean, and it's clear. He's done this rally so many times. It's a routine he has down, but it's a good one. I mean, in terms of as political speeches go, it's a really good political speech. It just happens to be full of lies or strategic omissions, which are the same thing as lying.
Yes.
So then I I waited till partway through the speech, and then he was starting an axe the tax chant, and so that's when I went up. It's not like I was interrupting a major exposition of his position. He was just getting everyone to cheer axe the tax. So I just sort of stepped out into the little clear space there and held up the banner.
I have the video here, ready to go. Let's just have a look. This is the incident. For want of a better term, this is the incident. Let's just take a look.
We know everything Trudeau has said about the carbon tax has so far been false. Got him.
I believe there will be.
So, yep, no yelling, no screaming, no resisting, no talking back, no sassing, no nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you considering charges?
No, I'm not planning to. I actually I think that would distract the attention from the main point, which is we need to have political debate. And I mean, I don't even know who the person was who grabbed me. I never actually saw them because, as you saw, I was grabbed from behind and hauled off. But I'm hoping I'm talking to you guys. I've sort of written a little piece I'm going to try and get published somewhere on this, because I do think Polyev should be challenged on climate change, but also on, a commitment to free speech, which isn't really. It's a commitment to him being able to say whatever he wants, or his supporters, but not necessarily anyone who disagrees with him.
Yeah, you don't get to, well, as evidenced by every time he gets asked a question by an interviewer in a scrum, he refuses to answer, sidesteps the question, and turns around and blames Justin Trudeau for all the faults of the world. And I'm like you said, well-crafted speech, well delivered, but full of lies and omissions. And we've been, on this show, we've been talking about that for the last, I don't know, forever, since we started, about how one of the big reasons we have this show, one of the big reasons we do this, is because we're just so sick of the unanswered lies, the unanswered omissions, the unanswered garbage. And it's just, we get frustrated beyond all belief when it comes to things like this. And as evidenced by the fact that you just held up a simple sign. Nothing offensive, nothing vulgar, nothing rude.
And I mean, I'm an all opportunity advocate. About last month, I was actually arrested in Chrystia Freeland's office for doing a little sit-in there, calling for the Liberal government to hold firm on their climate policies because they're backtracking. On the things that they promised, follow through on those, and then do new things like regulate the banks. But we would need pressure on the government as well. And, Chrystia Freeland is the finance minister, so she has a lot of decision-making power. But I also don't think we can let opposition politicians off the hook either. They need to be part of this, and they need to be, I would think, if you're going to be responsible opposition, which is an important role in our system of government, you also answer questions and address, say what you would do about things, not just why everything is someone else's fault. There's always going to be a bit of that in politics, but at some point you got to actually say what your plan is.
Well, this is right out of the Trump playbook, right? I mean, just it's disturbing to me that we've seen this for the last few years, but it's really ramped up in the last little while that they don't answer questions. They try and steer and change the narrative. It's like, so if you're going to do something different, what are you going to do? And they never seem to want to tell us. So, yeah, and everybody has to be held to the same standard, including the prime minister, his cabinet. If they lie, if they omit, if they lie by omission, if they're duplicitous, we're going to hold them to the same standard. You can't do that. We're not going to let you get away with it. We will hold everybody to that same standard. We'll put up a mirror and say, is this the person you want to look at in the morning and say, I'm okay to take on the day? Because you just lied to the Canadian public, and you did it on our dime, and we're not having it.
Yep, indeed. So you're at the rally. This happens. How long were you there before you stood up with your sign about?
I was probably there 40 minutes or so before the rally actually started.
Okay.
As the room filled, and probably, I don't know, about 20 minutes in, I'm not sure, but it was well underway. I'd heard most of his speech, and it was like that, that axe the tax chanting bit where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this now. But I got to hear most of his speech, and it's well-crafted piece of political theater, which is part of politics.
Yes,
right.
I mean, every party does that. That's but it's what is the story you're telling? I think is important, and I think it's important for citizens of democracy to also be asking, okay, what kind of a story are our leaders telling us?
Okay, so in the time that you were there, in your assessment, what was the story being told?
The story being told was everything wrong with your life right now is the fault of Justin Trudeau and the carbon tax. If we get rid of this, everything will go back. I wasn't actually there for the last line, which I sort of heard later, which was we'll go back to that moment where we're all sitting on our porches with the Canadian flag fluttering behind us. I'm like, well, not if it's climate fueled extreme weather blowing your house down. or like, in Newfoundland, literally washing houses into the sea.
Yes.
It's, it was scripted from start to finish. And it was designed to get people mad. I mean, that's one of the things that I find really frustrating with a lot of the politics right now. Is so much of it's about this cultivation of anger. So like, I put out a tweet on this, which my tweets, like if I get like a half dozen likes, that's nice. A really good one will get like, 30 to 50. This one got 1,000 likes and retweets, but it got 2,200 replies. And the anger in those replies, and like in my direct messages, which was, I will not show because it's inappropriate for an audience. But like the anger that's there, and part of it is some of this is just purely bots. I mean, there are a bunch of bots that are online, and on wildfires in particular, like I clearly triggered one which just sort of sends this slew of messages of, oh, it's arson, it's not, has nothing to do with climate change, it's just arson, it's bad. Because I think a lot of us, I would love to believe that the problem was like a few bad people. The fact that we need to like change the way our economy works. That would be a much easier solution. And you could, there's bad people, you punish them, the problem goes away. Actually, we need to change a lot of things about the way we live. That's a much harder thing to do. It would be lovely if all we had to do was arrest a few people and the problem would go away, but that's not how this works.
Right.
But people are being told that anyone who tries to tell you climate change is real has some kind of secret agenda. They're liars. They're probably the people who lit the fires. Like it's this onslaught, which, I mean, I originally missed your invite because I just stopped reading my reply because, just kind of like, you don't want to spend your whole day just scrolling people who are like screaming at you online. Even though that half of them aren't real. Right. It's like, Greg 05743221, like no kind picture. Of.
Yeah.
There's tons
exactly.
Of bots.
So there's two things that you mentioned there that two avenues I want to go down. When, in your opinion, as someone who has researched this type of thing, and based on what you know of the policy, if we did remove the carbon regulatory fee, would things go back to normal? Everything be fine? Would everybody be able to now afford their mortgage payments that have gone up 3.5% on their interest rate over the last little bit?
Yeah. So the carbon tax does have an impact, but it's very, very small on things like inflation. Like the calculation that's been done by the experts is it's, 0.3% of food inflation is related to the carbon tax. But again, you get a rebate. So even though you're paying a tax, you're getting a rebate back. It raises the costs of some things, but the point there is to get you to get other things as well. And, there's things like they've built in a higher rebate for rural communities because, if you're in a rural community, you're not taking transit. You don't really have a choice. And we have to, but we also, see the thing is the carbon tax isn't the only answer either. We have to do a whole bunch of other things, like, for instance, build great public transit so you can take an electric bus rather than drive a gas-powered vehicle. The sort of like the requirement to phase out gas-powered vehicles, the cleaning up the electricity grid, like these are all part of a package that are going to mean that you're actually, in the long term, your energy bills will go down because a lot of these things are actually cheaper. Like if you get a heat pump, I'm trying to get a heat pump for my house. It's expensive up front, but I'm going to save a lot of money over time on my energy bills.
Right.
Which is why things like having subsidies for heat pumps is a great idea.
Right.
And even more important, say banning in new construction, saying you can't put in gas fireplaces anymore. You actually have to start by putting in heat pumps, so people get those cost savings from the beginning. Which here in Ontario, Doug Ford is actually going to pass a law to overrule the Ontario Energy Board, which said, we're just going to shift the rules so that it makes more economic sense for a home builder to put in a heat pump rather than a gas fireplace. Like these are the kinds of things which we need to be doing alongside the carbon tax. The carbon tax is not the be all and end all, but if it was taken off, it's not going to make a huge difference on your bills. You're going to stop getting the rebate. You're actually probably going to be worse off economically. It's so frustrating to me because I also read so much news coverage where they say, the carbon tax is going up. They don't also say, the carbon rebate is going up.
Right.
They ignore that fact. Right.
Yeah. And I'm not everyone. There's lots of great reporters out there. But it's all, I watched the coverage of the Pierre Poilievre rally, and none of the TV coverage that I saw mentioned the fact that there was a rebate or that the rebate would be going up at the same time. So if you're just, casually watching the news, it's like, oh, this must be bad. Taxes are going up. No one loves that. No one loves taxes, right?
Nope.
But they actually are necessary.
Right.
And that's the role of responsible political leaders, is to make that connection. It's like, if you want nice things like schools, roads, hospitals, we actually have to pay for them. And so let's find a fair way to pay for them. And that, to me means progressive taxes. And like, for instance, I think we should be talking about having a wealth tax in this country. Because if you're wealthy, you don't pay the kind of income tax you used to.
No, you don't. No.
Back when income tax was much higher. But also most of that, income is actually, if you're rich, to avoid having income by you can play these accounting games, which is why you should tax wealth, because that's harder to hide.
Right.
But these are all, making the carbon tax go away makes for a great soundbite. I mean, I look at the conservative platform, right? Axe the tax, fix the budget,
build the homes.
Stop
it's just
the crime.
Stop the
Fire the liar. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Stop the crime is my favorite out of all of them. Okay.
We've only been trying to stop crime since the beginning of humanity.
Yeah.
Let me know when you're successful with that, dude.
No political leader ever in history said, no, I don't give a shit about crime.
Yeah.
Let the criminals run free. You know what we don't have in society? Enough criminals.
Slogans is all he has. There's no plan, no platform, and nothing to help anybody but the wealthy. I mean, let's face it. The carbon tax was designed by who? Do we have a drum roll? Do we have a drum roll? Stephen Harper. I'll find a drum roll for later. I have it somewhere. I just can't remember where I saved it. Stephen Harper was the one who came up with the carbon tax. It was his idea. What they called it, greenhouse gas emissions tax, I believe. He also came up with the luxury tax for expensive trucks. If you had a truck that was $120,000 or something like that, you were going to pay an extra tax on top of that. What they called it, the gas guzzler tax or something like that. Mm-hmm. All this came under Harper, but suddenly Trudeau's the evil man who's taking all your money. What do you say to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the carbon rate per is it metric ton? No, just ton of carbon right now at $65. It's going up to $80 on April 1st, but at $65 right now is the rate at which Stephen Harper said it would eventually get to when he originally made the announcement. Yeah. So right now, what anybody is paying is no different than they would be paying if Stephen Harper were still prime minister right now.
Yeah.
Based on the
challenge with that, I remember that when that climate plan came out from Stephen Harper, and there was it was funny because there was no opposition from the oil industry.
Yeah.
Nope.
And it was partially because I think they thought, he won't actually do this. He was just kind of floating it out there. But the carbon tax. The crazy thing is, I had a lot of economist friends. I did a bunch of economics courses. I like economists, but sometimes their political sense is often not great because they're kind of like, well, conservatives like markets, so they must like a carbon tax. Because that would be consistent.
Yes.
Like intellectually consistent. It's like, well, no, actually, they basically want measures that entrench the power of existing elites, in this case, in particular, oil industry. And if you try and bring in a measure that's going to challenge that, they will oppose it. Mm-hmm. And I always I wish it wasn't under a paywall, but in 2019, the Globe and Mail actually had a really good piece on how there's actually a summit meeting between Andrew Scheer's Conservative Party and the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers before the 2019 election, where they're basically like, how can we work together to defeat the Liberals?
Mm-hmm.
And it was they had the agenda that was all these things here's the ways you can do it. Here's how you can use third parties to advance your agenda.
Right.
It's that. And we're seeing that again right now. I think we're seeing, like the not so smart ones in the oil patch are actually like, going on record with Reuters saying, oh no, we're not going to spend anything on cleaning up our operations because we think Poilievre's going to win in 2025 and we won't have to do anything.
Right.
So we're just going to like make sure Trudeau loses and it'll all be good.
Right.
So that's, that if they don't clean up their mess, what their hope it's that mess just doesn't go away. Ultimately, it'll end up on the taxpayers if they don't do it. And so that's going to come out of our pockets. I think it's, we're in a way like a run up to an election. Hopefully it's not until 2025. But we need to start having these things talked about and stop giving conservatives a free ride in terms of what they will and will not talk about.
Yeah. What you mentioned is that something I call governments change, but we stay forever philosophy. So like we just got to wait out the next government. I mean, China, that's what China was trying with us when we had Meng Wanzhou in custody. It's, they were pressuring us and putting a whole bunch of detail, a whole bunch of stress and, tariffs and other types of things on us, on canola and other things, except for pork, because they really needed it for their holiday celebrations. So for some reason, they didn't put any on pork. But for anything else that they thought could damage us, they did. And then they were hoping that Trump again would win the next U.S. election, and they didn't. They were hoping that Trudeau would lose the Canadian election, and he didn't. And then when they found out, oh, well, gee, for the next 4 years, we're going to have Trudeau and Biden, I guess we're going to make a deal and just stop all of that. And boom, all of a sudden, the two Michaels were free and Meng Wanzhou was going home. But it really was. It was like, hey, let's just apply pressure and hope we get a change in government, and then we'll have a government that's more amenable to what we want. We'll have a government that signed FIPA with us for 31 years back in place, and maybe we'll be able to get our Meng Wanzhou back. And then we can go around our nation and say how propaganda-wise how we won. We defeated big, bad, evil Canada who tried to interfere in our affairs. And it didn't quite work that way, so then they cut bait because they didn't want to wear that for another 4 years. If I try to explain why it is she's not back yet, or, so it just became a safe face operation at that point. But we see that often, it's like, well, we'll just slow roll this and drag our heels there, and maybe we'll have another election, we'll get a change in government, and then we won't have to do anything. And unfortunately, that is a tried and true political strategy that has worked often enough to make it worth people to try that, to put the money into dragging their heels instead, because it all costs money anyway. If you're leading a campaign to drag your heels, you're still using your lawyers for some things, and you're still right. It's just to try and not, rather than just make the change and flow with the river, trying to resist it all the way. But I mean, corporations are paying for that, for the lobbying and the legal representation and the hit to goodwill and all of that kind of stuff that goes into making sure that you're dragging your heels. So they're not afraid of spending money. It's just to what end? So that's it's a little sad. The other thing that you were mentioning was about the accusations that environmentalists are starting the fires, or creating the arson. Now, just like when they talk about the carbon tax, they never talk about the rebate. When they say that accusation, there's still the inconvenient question. It's like, okay, well, let's assume they're all arson. Why are they burning so big and so long?
Yeah. So, I mean, for a wildfire, you need the right conditions. So it has to be dry and hot, basically. And you need something that sort of ignites it. And I mean, the ignition source is generally lightning. But if lightning hits, a tree or like a grass that's sort of green and full of and kind of wet, damp, it fizzles.
Mm-hmm.
But we've had these incredible like heat waves and droughts, so that when it's like tinder dry, and there's a difference between throwing your match back in. I think we're all old enough to remember when we used to light barbecues and you had like the little briquettes.
Yeah.
And they weren't self-lighting. You couldn't like just put a match to them and they would light. You had to like put on lighter fluid,
accelerant,
yes, or just in light. And like it's like climate change is basically adding the lighting fluid, so that when a lightning strikes or there is some kind of ignition, whether it's a spark from a train or the tailpipe of an ATV, I mean, those things get really hot, right? Like the mufflers and the tailpipes on them. You're driving through long grass. If the grass is nice and green and lush, nothing's going to happen. If it's tinder dry, you can actually start a fire that way. So like, some of the things of arson aren't even like someone went out and deliberately set a fire. It's kind of like where they're human caused. But it's partially because those conditions are there. But the vast majority of all this is lightning strikes, which is why, they're happening in incredibly remote regions. It's not like, we're parachuting in environmentalists into remote regions to like light fires and then run away. But I do think it is fascinating to me, like how people really want to believe that. And when leaders reinforce things people want to believe, particularly to get them angry so that they will donate money, which is part of the whole anger machine. The goal is to like raise money. And when you're feeding that kind of anger and division and not willing to actually talk about some of the real problems we face by presenting these like easy, simple solutions that aren't really solutions, that's bad for democracy. And I think we have to be calling it out. And I think it's the challenge increasingly is it's so easy to put people into little bubbles as to what they're seeing and hearing, that it can be really hard to break through. And, holding up a banner at a Polyev rally is kind of an attempt to do that. And I know a lot of people there were not happy about what I'm hoping, if even like 1/10 of them, why did that guy get hauled away for having that sign? Because again, I think like a lot of conservative voters, there's people there who care about climate change, and they're being fed this easy answer. And this, who's the villain here? The villain is actually the environmentalists. It's not. Whereas, there is no easy villain here. It's like, we got to change our energy system. And there's people who benefit from that system and who make, record-breaking profits in the oil patch the last couple of years, who want to keep that system going as long as possible. But for the public good, we actually have to change that.
Right.
While taking care of the workers in that area and those communities currently depending on oil and gas extraction. That's why, we had this plan for a just transition. And to me, the crazy thing was the Alberta government was actually running a petition which said, stop the energy transition. It was literally like, don't help oil and gas workers get ready for a post-oil economy. Do not do that.
Right. Just let them believe that it's going to be like this forever, that the party train will never stop. And then when the bottom falls out, oh, well.
Well,
that's capitalism.
The Royal Bank of Canada.
That's what happened with the cod.
Yeah, exactly.
We did not handle that one well. We don't want to do that again with oil.
The Royal Bank of Canada is divesting itself of petroleum investments. We read about this just a couple of days ago on the show, how they're like, that's it, we're out of this. They're not the only company doing that or considering it. There are tons of large financial institutions that are divesting themselves of anything to do with fossil fuels.
We're actually going to have a report out next week on Royal Bank's new climate policy, which we say the logic of their policy is they should divest themselves, but they haven't actually said they're going to do that yet. Oh, so okay. we're going to be pointing out that it's like, okay, you said if your clients don't, if you have clients who aren't ready for an energy transition, you will take that difficult step to move away from them. But they haven't quite defined who that is yet. And we're trying to say like, okay, the logic of this is here's some companies that should be on that list. But I think it's, the fact that they've even been taken to that stage is really important, because it's been public pressure that has really driven them there. But also, there are these changes coming in the economy. And the question now is, the energy transition, which is the shift off of fossil fuels. It's happening. The only question is, does it happen fast enough to avoid the worst impacts of climate change?
Right.
And how do we care for people through that transition?
Right.
And that's the conversation we need to be having.
Well,
there's a visual there that I have for you, because you were talking about the banks there. It's from Saanich News, and they were talking about a Quebec lender that's ending new mortgages in flood zones. So when we're talking on the show often about, they want you to get mad for a 2.86 cent increase per cubic meter of gas, but they don't want to get upset by the fact that your house insurance may have gone up 15% because of fires and floods, because it was record payout years for insurance last year. Or they don't want you to get upset, in this case, that you can't even get a mortgage in certain areas now where there's a flood zone. And it's like, people are going like, you may not believe in climate change, but banks, as you mentioned, Mr. Grizzly, insurance companies and oil companies sure do. And you know who else does? The military.
Yeah.
In all their intelligence and assessments reports and, military preparation, they're talking about, what climate change can do and, what can happen when people in certain regions of the world don't do any water at all or can't grow anything at all. And unrest that can happen and all, and mass migration and everything. There already is tons of mass migration we've been talking about for about 10 or 12 years. And a lot of people have been laughing, but there is climate migration. Now, it's not just economic or not just war. It's, hey, there's no water. We can't grow anything here anymore. We got to move. Well, so these are all realities that are going to show up. They're only going to amplify and become more common as the years go by. And we're going to have some strategies to deal with it other than, no, it's not really happening.
Yeah. The Pentagon calls climate change a threat multiplier. What it does is it takes a bunch of existing threats and makes them worse. And harder to deal with. And the Canadian military actually just had a paper out recently that I saw a story on last week, I think, saying basically the same thing, that the problem is, and often people are like, oh, this isn't only because of climate change. Oh, it's not only because of climate change, but climate change is a part of it, and it's making a bunch of existing problems a lot worse and much harder to deal with.
Well, this is let's we have another guest in the green room, and this is an individual who can add some commentary to this, because this is a retired military officer, Army Chris, our friend out in Edmonton. We'll call him our Alberta correspondent. Sir, good morning.
Oh, man. You ever walk into a conversation, you feel like you're the stupidest person in it?
Constantly.
All the time.
Like, don't bring me in. Don't bring me in.
Well, I just thought, we were talking about how the military has cited that climate change is a real threat. And
absolutely. It has to.
Yeah. And this is,
climate impacts the whole geopolitical spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, yeah, it's huge.
Well, and can you tell, because you worked in the oil patch for a while, right?
After I did. When I left the military, yeah, I went and worked for Suncor.
So you've seen firsthand the amount of, what's the word I'm looking for? Waste, the amount of, like, the tailing ponds. And I mean, you can tell us from somebody who's been there, literally boots on the ground.
Well, yeah. It's, again, you're getting into political painting here, because and I'm not an advocate for Suncor because they fired me. That being said, they're the first oil and gas company to successfully reclaim a tailings pond.
Oh, wow.
And you drive past it. When you drive on a Suncor base plant, it's monumental. Like, they showcase that you can reclaim a tailings pond. And the job I did up there was all infrastructure. It wasn't process work. It was non-process assets. And you can't do anything up there without going through an organization called reclamation.
Okay.
For every one tree you want to cut down, you better plant 10. No, it's oh, there's a reverb there.
I got it. There you go. We're getting a little bit of feedback from Keith's end, so I'll just stay on top of it there.
And I can't stand politics. I barely read the news these days. It's so polarized. We're just everybody wants to emulate the American model. Everything's too far left, too far right. Nobody's center anymore like they used to be, which is sad. But and I'm not here to advocate oil and gas. I obviously live in an oil and gas based province. But what I can say that gets ignored on the extreme left is the green policies, if you will, are very, very, very heavy in all of these oil and gas companies, Suncor being the biggest one in Canada. And yeah, so if you didn't know that, 100%, they've successfully reclaimed a tailings pond.
Did not know that.
There's grass growing there. There's deer running around, and there's a big, I don't know, I would call it a monument for lack of a better term. It's pretty early here. It's still the middle of the night for me, so bear with me.
Yeah, it is 2 hours earlier.
It's the thing, and you got to deal with reclamation or anything. They're like, no, you can't do that there. You know, you can't build this here because it's nesting season. So during nesting season, you know, there's like a 3-month window. You can't do anything in these spaces. And this is, you know, they own that property. That's their property, but they follow these rules and they do their best. And I get the impact that the oil and gas industry creates. I've seen the tailings ponds. I've seen the coke pits, which is a byproduct, these mountains of this black dust stuff that has no real value other than you can build roads out of it. They sell most of it to China, to be honest with you.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'm just rambling now. Help me out.
No worries, brother. Here, I'll bring. Let's Keith. I'll take you off mute there, sir, if you wanted to discuss that, because this I did not know about this.
Yeah, I mean, tailings ponds are a huge problem.
They are. They're horrible.
The main thing is we don't know what to do with the water, and they keep getting bigger. Like, so for the pond that Suncor reclaimed, I mean,
Pond
they move the
1A.
water from that pond. They move the water from that pond into another pond. Like, the water is kind of still there. There's over 1 trillion liters of the stuff, and we don't have a plan for kind of dealing with it. Which is the terrifying thing there is, I mean, what it looks like to me is the company's plan for this is basically like they're going to run these operations out as long as they can. Then you shut down, you declare bankruptcy, and you leave the tailings ponds there for somebody else to deal with, which is what the coal mines are all doing around the world. Because companies are, smart. If they can shift those costs back onto the taxpayer to deal with the problem at the end of life. Because these tailings ponds are going to take decades to deal with, and we still don't quite know how we're going to do it. But this is why you got to have the companies paying for these things as they go, because they've got the liability regime in Alberta is one of the loosest in the world in terms they don't have to pay the money up front. So sort of the assumption is they'll pay for it over time. But once those assets reach the end of their life, which is when you sort of then start trying to clean everything up, the smart company basically hives them off, lets that portion of the company go bankrupt, and then the problem is left to, we've seen this with the huge mine up in Northwest Territories. Yeah. I'm forgetting the name of it right now.
Giant mine.
But that's the kind of thing we need to have those policies in place to make sure that, we don't get stuck with the bill at the end of the thing. These companies are making money hand over fist while laying off their workers. I mean, Suncor, one of the things they're really proud of is the fact that they automated all their big trucks so they don't have to pay drivers anymore.
Correct.
And that's the kind of thing like
Suncor's not going bankrupt anytime soon, but
no. But even if what the companies tend to do is, as individual operations are reaching the end of life, you can so like what's happened to a bunch of the abandoned wells in Alberta is they get the well becomes abandoned. The company that owns them sells them off to some holding company based somewhere, cheap. That company then, I don't know how they get money out of this deal, but they then just declare bankruptcy and leave the thing for the farmer to deal with. And the original company that did it said, "Oh, it's not ours anymore. We sold it. It's not our problem."
It's a shell game, right? Basically, a financial shell game.
So it's this is where we got to have governments that are on their toes and looking out for our interests, because
well, there's Canada, a neat idea.
We're a major oil and gas producer. If the world is moving away from oil and gas the way I think it is, or even at half that speed, this is going to be a challenge for us, and we got to you got to prepare for that challenge and protect those communities, those workers, as that happens, rather than just letting that hit us. And I think I almost feel like, when I look at Danielle Smith, it's kind of like she actually wants people to get hit so they'll be mad at her political opponents and reelect her, rather than saying, okay, how do we actually help people get ready for that new world?
Because if the way that our contracts are allowed to be written so that people don't have to take a portion of the profits that they make and set it aside in some type of trust, that goes to pay for the cleanup, and all they can do is just keep the asset on the books indefinitely until it becomes a problem. It says, we've squeezed all the juice out of this lemon as possible. Now let's just slough this asset off to someone else and let them declare bankruptcy. That's in nobody's interest. That just, like I said, just make sure that we're paying money to help with these projects at origin to help them get off the ground, and then we're providing subsidies throughout their entire life. And then in the case of Alberta, we're not only Alberta, but we're there was another billion or a little more dollars supposed to go for the actual cleanup of these wells. And there was a report that just came out recently that said almost none of that money has actually gone to clean up any well. We've got absolutely nothing for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the company goes bankrupt, and then they're still there, and we still have to clean it up. So we're basically paying for it 3 or 4 times over instead of just once.
Well, that's the whole issue with orphan wells, which is different than abandoned wells, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. And who is it who has a lot of orphan wells right now is Brett Wilson, who we all thought when we saw him on Dragon's Den was a nice fella, but it turns out he's a little bit out there. It strikes me as they're being alarmist. Give you an example. Daniel Smith says, we're not moving away from oil anytime soon. I'm like, yeah, nobody said we were. Like, we're slowly trying to transition. Here's the thing. Even when the day comes that all vehicles are electrified or hydrogen powered or solar or whatever, once
you
that
can
happens,
park your EV next to your unicorn pen, because that's
but eventually it will happen. But here's the thing. Oil is never going to go away from our lives, period.
No, that's what makes plastic. Half the shit in the room right now comes from that. So
period. Hospitals can't operate without petroleum products. They cannot.
And I agree with that. But I also agree that they need some environmental accountability.
Absolutely.
And to get better. So it's the hard left is we got to get away from oil and gas, and everybody's going to have an electric car. Well, sorry, the grid can't handle it. Your lithium batteries for that car are $18,000. There are mountains of these batteries out in the desert in the United States that they don't know how to get rid of. Nobody wants to talk about that.
Actually, Mr. Beaver can probably make a commentary about car batteries, sir.
Yes. My partner has been doing research. He got his PhD and he found a way to recycle nearly 100% of the lithium out of an electric car battery with zero liquid or solid waste.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's trying
my
to get a
attention.
patent on it.
Yeah.
He's trying to get a patent on it because apparently with the projections that are in place for how much lithium we will need for the car batteries that we will need for the demand for electric cars, there's not enough known mining deposits available to be able to fulfill that demand. So we have to be able to recycle the lithium out of the batteries that already exist in such a way that the lithium recycled is pure enough that it can just be put into another battery. And it seems that he's found a way to do that.
Which is monumental.
Yes.
Really, when you think about it.
And for some reason, he can't get the article past the publisher yet to actually get it published so people can act on it. He's been trying to write that article for 4 years now, and they keep on saying, but what's the novelty on this? Really?
Yeah.
It's not obvious to you? Because it's not being done anywhere. But yes, I was reading this article.
I hope that gets legs.
Oh, yeah.
Me too, because we need it.
Like, think of the fundamental shift in our society with that, because all those, like you said,
those batteries would go back to the companies to be able to extract that lithium out of it, as well as the cobalt, nickel, and manganese. That are also
get
required.
to that, and you got my attention. But right now, it's a great idea.
Yeah,
but an EV is not practical where I live right now.
No.
Yeah. But so what I say is,
and I want a Tesla. They go like shit, man. I rode one in Amsterdam, a taxi driver. That fucking thing gives her. I want that. Trust me. 0 to 60 like now.
Yeah. But it is really important.
Keith, go ahead.
The recycling stuff now, so that we're not creating new problems in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I also think there's a lot of really interesting. I think in 10 years, not all the batteries are going to be lithium. There'll be sulfur batteries, which are for applications where the weight doesn't matter as much.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a range of things. And if you look at what's happened, so solar power, the price dropped 90% over the last decade.
Mm-hmm.
Lithium ion batteries have actually dropped about the same. And the prices are still going down. It's partially as you move from kind of niche innovation, almost handcrafted things, to this mass production, the technology gets better, the prices go down. We're going to see this continue. But it is really important that we do get in place those recycling programs, because then you actually don't have to mine everything, one time and then throw it away. You actually keep using it. And the advantage is this stuff is pretty valuable. So it's going to be, there's an incentive there to recycle it rather than just toss it.
Exactly.
But it's, like the International Energy Agency, they've sort of mapped out a way we could reduce oil demand by 75% by 2050.
Yeah.
So it's not to zero, but it's getting there. And most of the stuff that's left is plasticky type stuff, which again, I also think we're going to be developing alternatives to over the next couple of decades.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not going away tomorrow,
No.
but demand is going down. And once demand starts to drop, prices go down fast. And that's where the oil companies, I think, can run into trouble. And as Canadians, we need to prepare for that, because it's I don't think it ever was, but it certainly is no longer a case where what's good for oil is good for Canada. We actually have to sort of pursue what's best for us, which is to make sure people have affordable energy that meets their needs so that they can get where they need to go. So their home is, warm in the winter, cool in the summer. But we can do that in a lot of ways. And that's the kind of thing we should be talking about, to come back to the Polyev rally. If
you guys
you're
have too
gonna
many
throw
rallies,
people
man.
out for even raising the issue, we're really not going to come up with those kinds of solutions.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed. The article that I was looking for, I found it. It was an Alberta senator who was trying to get answers about an orphan well cleanup in the province of Alberta and whether federal funding was being properly used to do so. So it was Senator Paula Simons, who cited a report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer released in January that shows that more than $500 million federal dollars for orphan and inactive well cleanup has gone to large energy companies. Quote, I asked the PBO whether any of that $556 million had gone to cleaning up actual orphaned wells, and I was informed by the parliamentary budget analyst that not one single orphan well in Alberta, not one, had been cleaned up with this grant money. The federal government had allocated $1.7 billion for the cleanup of inactive and orphan wells in 2020, with $1 billion going to Alberta. The money was being handed out through the province's site rehabilitation program in stages. The Orphan Well Association was also given $200 million loan at that time. The Parliamentary Budget Office confirmed to CTV News that its analysts found that of the $1 billion in funding to Alberta, more than half had been given to large companies it considers to be viable. So at the time of the report, CNRL, Canadian Natural Resources Limited, had received $102 million, Cenovus Energy received $12 million, Husky Energy was given $16, and Imperial Oil Resources Limited received $11.7 million. Those amounts are increasing as the province works through applications at different stages of the site rehabilitation program. Quote, so now I'd like to ask, what exactly did we get for the $102.5 million we gave to CNRL or the $18 million we gave to Cenovus, etc.? Simons asked. And what are we actually going to do to clean up the wells that are actually orphaned? The government representative in the Senate, Mark Gold, said that he'd make inquiries into Simons' questions. But in a statement, CNRL said that the federal funding helped the company and others reclaim inactive well sites and support job creation. Quote, Canadian Natural is committed to effective and efficient management of our liabilities and environmental footprint, including reducing the inventory of inactive wells through a robust program of well abandonment and progressive reclamation activities. For example, Canadian Natural abandoned 5,570 inactive wells in Western Canada from 2015 to 2020, in addition to over 3,000 inactive wells abandoned in 2021. And that's where the article ends, and it almost makes me seem that there should have been more to that article. And I don't know if there was, and it just didn't get published or it got cut off, because that's a weird spot for that type of article to end, because there's actually not an answer.
Maybe there'll be a part 2.
I actually wrote them and said, is that the entire article? Because it just ends on a statement about how many wells that CNR, but nothing about what they did.
It was a dangling participle.
Yeah. So it seems that they're, when they say that they're using the money to reclaim inactive well sites, what does that mean? Because it just seems to me is like, when I'm reading this, I'm hearing they're buying the sites back. Well, why would you buy the sites back? Aren't they already yours?
I have no idea. Your Alberta correspondent has no clue. In fact,
I'm not sure what reclaim means in that in this instance.
well, it depends how they define reclaim. Right?
Yeah.
When I work in that industry, whether it's support to that industry or whatever, when you say reclaim, that means you're returning it to the state that it naturally was. So that's great. Now, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
And who is the one who checks it off to say, yes, this is now reclaimed?
Mm-hmm.
No one can define that. So we're going in the big circle like that article. It doesn't really tell you anything.
Yeah.
Who's the governing body that says this is reclaimed and it's something they own? It's like having your company internally audit yourself and go, hey, we're good to go. Check in the box.
Yeah. Well, we'll
one of the really common things in Alberta in particular is companies. So the well stops producing, and once they sort of say we're done with it, they're sort of supposed to start cleaning it up. So what they often do is they simply never say we're done with it. They'll sort of say like, oh, we're thinking about going back and maybe trying to get some more oil out of that well. So they never actually, the requirement to clean up never kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the backlog is because there's all these sort of wells which are inactive, but haven't been declared, like haven't gone to the status of now we have to clean them up. And again, if you're a company, that's just smart, right? Like, why would you kind of put liabilities onto your books to require this cleanup if you don't have to? So the federal money that went to clean up for that program you're talking about was during the pandemic, and it was part of that whole like let's get people back to work, like let's just get people working, get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
But it was supposed to come. It came with a requirement that Alberta kind of tighten up the polluter pay provisions of its oil well cleanup requirements. And Alberta, I mean, they changed the rules, but they didn't really tighten them up very much. So it's kind of like then. Because the deal was the feds were going to give them a lot of money, like it was $1 billion or whatever, for cleanup. But Alberta had to sort of like tighten up the rules and close all these loopholes because there was a bunch of loopholes. Companies were using them. People had figured out companies were using them. It's a rational thing for companies to do. If you give them a tax loophole, for instance, they're going to use it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the problem was we didn't actually like close all those loopholes. And there was a desire to get the money out so fast because of the pandemic that it was kind of like, here, we'll take this on faith. And to be honest, like the Alberta government just let the oil industry write the rules, which again, they're going to write rules with loopholes. Which is why CNRL gives these kinds of vague answers, because there's all sorts of like little shell games going on behind the scenes of how you classify different wells and when it's. And to be honest, like I have lost track of how all that works. It's the kind of thing like every once in a while I relearn it and then it's like fills up my brain and then eventually I have to empty that part of the brain for something else because it actually is incredibly complicated.
Okay.
I understand that.
Right.
Yeah. It's like politicians.
If we're talking about our overall climate strategy to the moment, I know that people like to talk about it in idealistic terms or what would be the perfect thing to do and how far off are we. I would like to talk about it more into what were things like prior to this current government, federal government, and what they are like now. Are we actually, under this government, making some right decisions and making some progress, taking steps in the correct direction? Better than, let's say, had we been maintaining the same direction that we were going on under the previous government? Has there actually been a net improvement of some kind? Keith?
I would say on climate change, yes. I mean, the Harper government strategy was, and Harper actually, the only time Harper ever gave speeches which were kind of passionate was when he talked about Canada as an energy superpower, rooted in the tar sands. So their strategy was
oil sands, not tar.
Yeah.
Okay, oil sands. I'm old enough that it was tar sands.
It was tar sands for me too, but yeah.
And this government has brought in a bunch of policies, not as much as Greenpeace would like. There's a bunch more stuff we want them to do, but they have brought in a bunch of policies. Some of the key ones right now, they haven't actually like finalized the clean electricity regulations, the zero emissions vehicle standard, the cap on oil and gas emissions from the oil and gas sector. Those are all sort of like in the works. And one of the things, like when I was at Minister Freeland's office last month, sort of saying, you guys need to actually get this job done, because they're kind of like stalling on all of those because of the political pushback.
Right.
And watering them down. And we're saying, no, you actually have to like move forward on these things, because they're the right thing to do. And actually also, I think overall, they're politically popular. Like, people do want action on climate change. So still not doing nearly as much as we need to. But, you know, if you Harper to Trudeau, like, it's a lot better. And I mean, as I cited before, you know, you have a bunch of oil companies, oil CEOs telling, you know, Reuters news agency that, oh yeah, we're just holding off on investing in any of the cleanup stuff because we're really hoping Polyev wins, which is an indication of what would happen if that happened. And, you know, Polyev has actually been very clear. I had a piece in the Hamilton Spectator a couple months ago on like, you know, what is the conservative position on climate change? And it's basically to undo everything that the Liberals have done, but propose nothing in its place.
Well, that's
why I really want to say, okay, like, what would you actually do? Don't just tell me what you're not going to do. What would you actually do? Or are you admitting that you're going to do nothing, which is a decision to maximize suffering? Like, a choice to do nothing to address climate change is a choice to maximize suffering from the extreme weather, from floods, from wildfires, all those things that are affecting, you know, 160,000 Canadians driven from their homes last summer by a threat of wildfire. We don't want that to become the norm.
No. And right now,
well, Chris was going to say something there.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Oh no, it's Keith. I mean, let's be honest. No politician ever says what they're going to do. They just shit on the other guy.
Yeah,
that's the Canadian model.
Yeah,
right. Like,
but it's our job to make sure that they start saying these
exactly. I'm so tired of hearing, because everybody assumes that I'm a conservative. I am, but I'm not a PP fan. He's just the next idiot.
Yeah,
right. That's it. What are you going to do? Don't tell me what this guy's doing wrong. I know what he's doing wrong. I'm well aware. I'm living in that. Tell me what you're going to do. And they can't do it.
Yeah.
So I agree. Not just on anything environmental, like fucking anything, period.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my banter. I digress.
No, but you're not wrong there, sir, because we see the slogans from Polyev. Build the homes, axe the tax, spike the hike, stop the crime. Okay.
What is axing the tax going to do? First of all, the problem with a carbon tax is the name of it.
Yes.
Stop giving these things names, because you're just dividing the country. It's a fucking tax. We need taxes to build infrastructure.
Period.
If you're going to put a fancy name on it, tell me what you're going to do with that money. If you're part of an organization, you have to deliver, you know, a financial statement every year to that organization. If you're a treasurer, and it defines what you're doing. All I want to know is, what are you doing with the money? So you guys were talking about the rebate earlier. I'm like, why are you giving me a rebate? Like, either if you're going to take the money, keep it and do something with it. Don't give it back to me. Like, that makes no sense to me.
The rebate is, correct me if I'm wrong.
It's to make it palatable.
Well, that's part of it, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, gents, somebody who might know this better than I do. As I understand
exactly. I'm counting on Keith here to bail me out here, because I don't understand the point of this tax. Tell me where the money is going and show me a tangible result, and then don't give me the money back.
Well, as I understand,
what it was intended for.
The rebate that we get is from the larger corporations that are paying a much larger fee. And it's, again, we call it a carbon tax. The Supreme Court of Canada said it's not. It's a carbon regulatory recovery fee. But calling it a carbon tax makes it simple. But here's the thing. The rebate we get is from the big companies that are paying much more into it, as I understand. Now, I could be way wrong on that.
I don't
Beaver
know.
Or Keith, if you can address that.
Somebody smarter than me answer that. I just want to know what they do with the money. Don't give it back to me. Go do something with it, and then show me a result. A tangible result of what that money was used for, and I'm happy.
Yeah,
I like getting money back from
you
the
can do it
government.
different
Everybody
ways.
does.
So, like in Ontario, this I live in Ontario. So in Ontario, before Doug Ford killed the
cap and trade
system here, which we sued him over, there was a requirement in the legislation that all of the money raised through that had to be spent on measures to reduce climate change. So it was, buying electric buses and doing that kind of stuff, paying for transit, paying for other measures. The reason you get a rebate is to try and make it politically palatable. You're absolutely right on that, Chris. It was and the goal was, because the way the system works is everyone gets the same amount of money back. So if you can reduce the amount of carbon basically the amount you pay because you buy less gas or something like that, because you get a more efficient vehicle or you switch your home to a heat pump, the idea is you get to keep more. So you still have an incentive to try and avoid the tax. But the money comes back is there's a separate industrial system for the really big polluters. That money doesn't come into this rebate system. It's the fact that you have a bunch of companies that also buy gasoline at the pump. So the total amount is not just the amount individuals pay, but companies, fleets pay by gas at the pump, and then they have to pay the tax. And so there's a little bit more there. So some of that money, not all of it, is rolled into it and is rebated to individuals, to households. So to be honest, my family, we make a killing on the carbon tax. The rebate is so much more than what we end up paying. But it's the goal was to make it politically palatable, but the Liberals have really fumbled the communications on this. They finally renamed the thing, so it's because it used to be no one understood the system, and so if you're trying to tell people support this because we're giving you money back, and no one understands that they're getting money back or how, it's not actually doing that job. So it's that was a compromise to try and make it more popular. And I think the Liberals have fumbled the communications on it, but also it doesn't help when you have people regularly lying about it.
Well, this is the problem. You could have avoided all this shit by just saying, or not putting a name on it. You're not creating a reason for people to argue. Just taxes go up naturally, right? Based on the economy. And then just say we're out in the budget allocating X amount to whatever for environmental. Just do that. Why do you got to put a fancy name on it and then piss people off? That's what's going on. Because you need to break this down to layman's terms for to the level that I process this at. It's like everybody's up in arms. Axe the tax. Taxes don't get axed. If PP gets in, I can't pronounce his name. He's just the next idiot to me. He's not going to get rid of it. No government will ever get rid of a tax. That is friggin' mythology.
Yep.
This is where somebody said something.
I just wanted to say good morning. Keith, it's really nice to meet you. And
nice to meet you.
Army Chris, thanks for a great conversation last night. I'm just catching up a bit, and
all good.
I'm allowed to take the chair for a few minutes because Paul's taking the.
You need to, because I have no idea what I'm talking about. If anybody out here said, Chris, hey, are you going to get up at 4:30 in the morning to talk about the environment? I'm like, no.
I hate the earth. Why would I do that? Fuck you, Mother Nature.
I'm like, do you guys want to talk about guns for a little while, or something?
I actually would, because you and I had a good conversation about that last night.
We did, but we got Keith on. He doesn't look like a gun guy to me.
No, well, I mean, there's a lot of.
I got no problem. I mean, this is where
I believe in gun control.
Yeah, I think you need rules. I mean, again, I live in downtown Toronto.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you probably don't need a gun.
The gun issue here is a little different than it is in northern Alberta.
Exactly. And
I don't want to shift fire from the. Well, actually, I do. Everybody thinks, okay, you look at me. He's ex-military, white male, wears camouflage ball hats, drives a pickup truck, and lives in Alberta, so he must be a gun nut. I have lots of guns, but I know how to use them. I don't think everybody needs a gun.
Well, you're right.
And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
You take some 2-day stupid course and suddenly you're a gun expert? No.
No, you have to be. I mean, I've shot a rifle once, and I was not trained properly. I was at a farm in Ireland, and it was like a very old gun, and I shot at some cans. But the first time
How'd you make out?
I shot the can.
Perfect.
But and it was fun, but I also, the first time I shot it, like, I wasn't ready for the kickback, and I dropped the gun. I dropped a loaded gun, and that
Ooh,
is
that's not good.
not safe. Like, I was just like, honestly, I never need to do that again. But I have opinions. I don't know if anyone wants to hear them. I'm gonna tell them anyway. But like, I've lived in rural settings. I've been fortunate to work with a lot of Indigenous communities as well, and hunters and hunters and gatherers, and then, like, Inuit marine monitoring folks who are doing work across the Arctic, and they can't go out on the land without a gun. Without guns, like, they're sleeping in shacks that polar bears can just be like, "Boop," and the polar bears are in and, like, eating your face, right? So they need guns.
Yeah, I've
And
been up there.
right? And so it's complex. It's like and so the new firearms legislation from the federal firearms legislation was ham-fisted. It was like they were gonna ban all these guns that hunters need, like, and
No, they shit the bed on that.
they've tried to fix it, and I'm fortunate to be part of a little bit of a very tiny part of it, but I'm like, I don't want a gun. I believe in gun safety. I believe in gun control, but it's also in this country, um, we don't have one size fits all legislation. And, yeah, if you're in the Arctic and you need a gun, you need to, you know, be properly trained. And
Oh, I agree. It's just it got out of hand because again, I know you guys like to shit on PP all the time. I just want to shit on Trudeau for 2 minutes. Just a little
right
bit. I hate them all. So where's that reverb coming from?
I think, does somebody maybe have a speaker on?
Not me.
I can't tell. Sorry.
not me.
The AR-15 was banned because it's evil. You know how many deaths in Canada over years from an AR-15 are? Anybody have an idea?
Nope, not at all.
0. My issue with Trudeau is he takes U.S. issues and then makes them Canadian issues that aren't issues, right? So as soon as there was there's a mass shooting in the States fucking every week. I think it was the one in Texas. Right after that, he's like, we have to ban all these guns. Like, why? Like, why do you have to do that?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of. I'm gonna come at you a little bit, Army Chris. And,
Go ahead.
It comes with mad respect for you, but one of the issues, and I don't know about the weapon that you were talking about, but guns are also related to gender-based violence, and there are like the mass shooting in the one in our neck of the woods,
Yeah.
and the one out east. And anyway, I'm not explaining it very well, but yeah, guns are connected to gender-based violence, and it's something that needs to be looked at. So it's just, there's no one simple answer, right?
Oh, I don't disagree with you, but my
Hunting,
concern
it's
is this:
protection, it's
is
gender-based
criminals don't
violence,
care.
yeah.
These gun rules.
Oh yeah, I'm with you on that.
They punish responsible gun owners. Criminals don't care. Here's the problem. If you look at how much money the federal government is going to spend on the buyback program, it's more money than they've allocated to Canadian Border Services and the RCMP to stop cross-border gun smuggling. That dude out in Nova Scotia that had the cop car and everything,
yeah,
not one of those guys' guns was legal, and they all came out of the States. Like, if you want to solve a problem, whether it's climate or guns, like, come up with something that's actually going to work.
Well,
that solves the root cause of the problem.
I have some good.
We're gonna ban all these guns. Oh, that's really great Because the criminals using them give a shit if you ban them? No.
Hugh, I'm with you. Thank you for that. And I have some good friends who work for CBSA who are frontline, and my gosh, what they put up with, and they are so underfunded. And you know, one of my really good friends, he like when we started hanging out, he's like, you know, I was at his house. He's like, just so you know, I wear a gun to work every day, and I also have my own guns. But he is so well trained,
That's the
absolutely
difference.
safe. Like he's
I
got
believe in training.
his ammo is in a safe, and you know, he takes it when we went to hang out at his cottage, and he's like, you know, like everything was done so properly. But in terms of his work, I mean, the underfunding is, I'm with you. Like it's like, yeah, okay, I support the buyback program. I didn't know how much it costs, but
oh, it'll be 3 times what they said it costs.
But
Look
yeah,
at what
like
remember the long gun registry, what that ended up being? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it was exorbitantly higher. Because I know how much money they're offering on an average per weapon, how times 300,000 that are out there.
okay.
What are you going to do with them all? You're going to send them to Ukraine? You're going to melt them down? It's all the administrative fees, all the people that process everything. There's multipliers of costs here that are not the Canadian public are not aware of. Now, just let me go backwards because I sound like the gun nut. I don't think people need AR-15s either because they don't know how to use them. And why do you need that? What are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
Zombie apocalypse? Maybe. Do I have an AR-15? I can't use it anymore. And to be honest with you, I never did use it. I bought it. It's been fired. 5 rounds went through the thing, and that's it.
Listen,
but
if there's a
most
zombie
people don't
apocalypse,
need
I'm
this.
coming to your house. Sorry.
And then you got these crazy guys that have like 90. Like, why do you need that many? That dude down in the States that shot up the concert in Vegas, he had like 100 AR-15 assault rifles. Oh, I don't know. Maybe there should be some checks and balances on why a guy's buying 100 guns.
You know, I remember the first time I went to Chicago and I drove into town, and I started hearing these bang, 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 and I was like, you know,
Chicago's a dangerous city.
It is. And anyway, it turned out it was just quarter sticks of dynamite that people were lighting off for some celebration.
Oh, that sounds like America right there.
America. But I'm like, I'm going to die here. And I was in an incident that fortunately did not get violent, but I was accosted on the street
in Chicago. And you got to get a taser. That's what people need.
I think,
right? Clean energy, man. It's electric.
I think I just need a good
tasers.
Throat punch.
Throat punches are good. Hey, you know Neil Young is coming to Edmonton. Can you believe that? Like, why would he come here? People hate him.
Really?
He's anti-oil stands and all that stuff. Keith, what do you think Neil Young's footprint is for every time he does his carbon footprint to do a concert?
He's actually like super responsible on this stuff and like sources all of his things. He's actually like he walks his talk. Oh yeah, no, he's
okay. No, if he does, that's cool because like I find guys like DiCaprio and all these other people. I know what your carbon footprint's a lot bigger than you're claiming. Like, so if you say that, I believe you because you're shit.
Neil Young is grumpy, but he is like follows through on his like positions. Like,
even if I'm like on the other side of the fence, I appreciate people who are not full of shit. If he walks the walk, cool. Got it. I respect that. It's guys that come out and do this to make some noise and create some controversy on Twitter or whatever that are not living that way. They're talking shit. That's what I can't stand.
Yeah, I'd like to take up on that because one of the criticisms that Pierre Poilievre often has of the prime minister is by virtue of the fact of doing his job of being prime minister, he needs to travel places. And
he does.
He's representing his use of having to be able to, for example, get to Europe to go to a G7 conference or to go to the Queen's funeral or something like that, which, if the prime minister didn't go to the Queen's funeral, well, then you'd have all the people from the CBC going, like, what about our institutions? What about our tradition? What about that? Like, we're such an embarrassment. We can't even afford to go. But then if we go, it's like, oh my God, well, how much GHGs did you use on that plane? Could you give us your opinion on why that this might be a particularly disingenuous argument when it comes to, for example, the prime minister specifically, who has a specific job to do.
Yeah, so I would say we all should try and fly less. I know I've stopped flying unless it's really important for like I fly for like weddings and funerals, basically. I'll actually to Alberta because most of my family's out in Alberta, including one of my nephews who's former military who now works in disaster relief stuff. I think you, Chris, you'd get along great with him.
Oh, right on.
But obviously, like, we need to change systems so that people can do the right thing rather than like asking everyone to be pure. And what I find is a lot of the attacks people make on someone for being, like not because, anytime I am doing stuff, I'll often have people say like, well, do you use fossil fuels in your life? If you do, then you should just shut up. And the point is we need to change those systems so it's easy for people to make the right choice so they can actually like live a good life without undermining the ecological basis of that life. And so for like things like flying, we should all try and do less of it. For certain types of jobs, you're going to have to fly. I think like there is an expectation of our politicians. If you're going to like represent a country like Canada as the prime minister, you're expected to like not just sit in Ottawa. You're supposed to go out to different parts of the country. So that's normal, like, and I would say, so what we would, I'd say like, okay, like if you're going a short distance, take the train or a bus. So, like if I go to Ottawa to see my sister or go for meetings or to Montreal for meetings, because we have a bunch of colleagues in Montreal, I'll take the train. But I often find the attack on people for, individual decisions is a way to just try and send a message that don't even bother trying to do better because you're not going to be perfect. And unless you're perfect, there's no point in trying to like be better. And I think we always have to try to be better, but also build systems so that it's easier for everyone to be better. It shouldn't have to be a massive amount of work to do those things. So like I have never actually owned a car because I have lived in cities which have transit and I can bike everywhere and it's how I actually like try and stay healthy. But I have an auto share membership. And I went to the Pierre Pellier rally, which was way out by the airport, and there was no way to get there on transit on a Sunday. I like took an auto share car, which you can rent by an hour. And I try, and if I'm going to go to like IKEA and get something that I can't carry home on the bus, I'm going to like rent a car. Like, it's like, I'm trying to minimize. And sometimes I could even get an auto share car that is a hybrid and eventually they'll be electric and that'll be better.
And that's great if you live in downtown Toronto.
Yeah,
exactly. That's not gonna work.
No,
in a lot of places in this country.
No,
and
which is one of the reasons why you have the climate rebate.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be shaming people for making decisions because they don't have a better option. Right? We need to make sure we have those better options, and everyone trying to do better is not something that like because it's amazing how much you get. I see people getting attacked for hypocrisy. For doing something which they say they want to like save the climate, but then they do something which adds fossil fuels. This is part of the world we live in. I'm sure back in the days of opposing slavery, the abolitionists were told you should walk naked because your clothes were made by cotton, made by slaves. So it's like, no, you can actually try and change a system while living within it in an imperfect world. That's part of being human.
Absolutely.
I could see that. Absolutely. We're getting ready for an election, hopefully in 2025.
Oh God!
Great. If a party wanted to seriously present some environmental credentials, some climate, and maybe not just only climate change, but in general environmental, because there's more to taking care and being good stewards of the environment than just reducing GHG emissions. What are some essential elements that you believe should be present in the platforms?
So I would say we need to have solid policies which are going to help people use less fossil fuels. So transition off so that that's the default option. So example, new homes getting built should have heat pumps built into them, should be super efficient, and should be prepared to deal with extreme weather. Mark Carney, who's a guy I don't always agree with, but he has a piece in this morning's Globe and Mail on that exact topic. We should be able to have affordable homes and that also are good for climate. That's actually the kind of thing which public policy can do. We need to clean up our electricity system. We need to sort of bring in those rules that will transition our vehicle fleet over to electric vehicles while also building the infrastructure so that people can actually charge those vehicles, etc. One of the big things I'm working on right now is actually we need to start regulating banks the way we do tailpipes and smokestacks. We need to sort of get the banks to start shifting because they're, the money flowing through the banks is bigger than the government. They're like huge investment. Canada's big five banks have given it over $1 trillion to fossil fuel companies since the Paris Climate Agreement was signed. We need to sort of start ramping down the money going to fossil fuels, ramping up those investments in renewables. That's part of what RBC said they were going to increase their renewables portfolio. But we actually need kind of rules on that because asking the banks to do it out of the goodness of their heart is not a terribly successful strategy. Again, I just saw a piece this morning on the banks getting caught once again, sort of like upselling people and misleading marketing on someone went in with like a hidden camera. That's why, we need rules for these types of things so that the big, and particularly when we make big infrastructure investments, it's got to be green. Because those are the kinds that shift huge parts of our economy. So rather than expecting everyone to sort of do it all through their being a green consumer, we actually have to make it so that everyone's a green consumer by default. And for that, there's like a million different things we need to do, but like in terms of it's like shifting as much to electricity as possible, electrification, build out that green grid. We need to make everything more efficient so we're using less energy to do the things we need to do. Like there's like a suite of policies that are all out there, and that's what we need to be talking about rather than axe the tax, I think.
Okay. The other question that just popped into my mind because it was big news for a while and then it kind of disappeared. But the Premier of Alberta had put a moratorium on on green energy and cleaner energy projects for a certain number of months to try to come up with new rules and regulations, allegedly having to do with reclaiming that land. I believe those rules were recently announced, were they not?
So
that's what I was wondering.
there would be rules, but they aren't clear on what those are. So for instance, like one of them was you can't build the stuff within 35 kilometers of a site of like scenic beauty, which is like, okay, who gets to decide what that is? The thing here is like renewables are facing these like really strong restrictions in Alberta. There was a moratorium. Now and a lot of the renewables developers are like, still don't know what the rules are, so we're not going to like invest anything. But none of those same rules are being applied to the oil and gas sector, which having solar panels on your property or an oil well, only one of those can contaminate your groundwater. And, and what's fascinating is the government got a report back in January from the Alberta Utilities Commission, like the agency that runs the electrical system.
Right.
They refused to release it before they brought out these rules. They bring out these rules, and then it just got released yesterday. And the AU, like the regulator said, actually, there isn't a big problem on sort of conflict between agriculture and renewable energy. These actually work pretty well together. It's even if you imagine the worst possible case, it's like affecting less than 1% of agricultural land, and it's in a way that doesn't cause long-term harms. And they basically, there's not a real big problem here. So, like we could clarify the rules, but it's not really needed, or it's not a huge crisis compared to like, the hundreds of billions in liabilities for the oil and gas sector. Sorry, I don't think they said that part. I'm adding that editorially. So the government basically brought in a politically motivated moratorium. They ignored the advice of their experts. And it's all to basically preserve market share for natural gas. That's what this is really about. And if you look at the United Conservative Party in Alberta, their main financial backers are the players in the sort of small and medium-sized natural gas companies. Those are the people who brought Danielle Smith to the premiership, and she's giving them the reward for their loyalty.
Interesting. So she promised new rules in about 7 months that would allow the industry to get back on hand, but essentially we don't have rules that are clear enough to allow the industry to get started again. So basically, this moratorium is essentially still on for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, they're choking back the investment. Because and they say, so now they're saying, we'll bring out a map of where you can build it, where not. But it's kind of thing like, okay, that would be the kind of thing you would normally announce with a policy, rather than saying we'll get back to you later on, where this actually applies.
Huh.
Interesting.
That's really weird. So we have an entire section of industry that Alberta was essentially leading in, and she's just making a decision to abandon it and leave it without the clarity that the oil sector is actually, and energy sector in general, is actually asking and requesting and demanding, so that they know. Because I know that there's a lot of demand from traditional oil companies to have clarity on the rules, so that they know, like, for the next 10 years what's going on, so they know where to invest and what to invest in. Hopefully not have the rug pulled out from them every second or third year. But I'm guessing green energy suppliers would like that same type of clarity, and it seems that they are deliberately not being given it. Would that be your assessment?
Yeah, this is an attempt to choke back that industry. It's clear, and it's tens of billions of dollars of potential investment that is either on hold or gone.
Yeah. So I'm seeing this. I have an article from the Narwhal here, and it says exactly what you said. Yeah. So the government plans to establish 35-kilometer buffer zones around protected areas and other pristine viewscapes, quote unquote, that will prevent wind farms from being developed, which could impact the majority of land in Alberta. Other renewable projects within those buffers could be subject to, quote, visual impact assessments. Speaking to the media on Wednesday, spokesperson said there's no universal definition of what constitute a pristine viewscape, but generally refers to, quote, areas that are unobstructed natural landscapes.
Yeah, that's pretty vague.
Clear.
I mean, you talk to anybody in Alberta, everything there is scenic.
No, it's not. Alberta, listen, climate, Alberta is going to burn this summer.
Oh, yeah. No, but in terms of is Alberta beautiful?
Oh, yeah.
We just talked about the renewable rules where they say you can't build within 35 kilometers of someplace scenic.
Yeah.
How do you define that?
Yeah,
that's the question that hasn't been answered.
Yeah, we have this guy named Jordan Dye, who's the executive director of the Business Renewable Center Canada, who basically said, I think we will start to see the major impacts once we get the rules announced, although I like to highlight that regulatory approval for renewable projects took on average 6 months in the time before the moratorium. So at a minimum, the moratorium itself doubled the time for the regulatory portion of all these projects. While details are needed across all categories, particularly concerning is the continued vagueness of the viewscapes requirements. Taken at face value, an unprecedented 35-kilometer buffer zone around all protected areas would eliminate 76% of southern Alberta and would create a backdoor land ban. Any project that's even close to a protected area or what might be considered a protected area can't move forward until there's certainty from the provincial government. Dye called the new rules a second, quote, soft moratorium due to the uncertainty and extent of the changes. The new rules will apply to all projects approved after March 1st. There are currently 26 projects working towards regulatory approval. Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
We're full of shit out here anyway. We're full of shit. Listen, Alberta's full of shit. The city of Edmonton's full of shit. I take out my blue bin with my recycling, right? You got to separate it. Different vehicle picks it up. You know where it goes? It goes to the same fucking landfill.
It does. Yeah.
Talk about a waste of money and complete bullshit. That's what happens here.
Well,
it's ridiculous.
I've seen so I've friends who work in different areas in different industries and in different organizations throughout this city. And I have visited, and I'm not going to name the institution, but large institutions that have out the green bin, the blue bin, one's for metal, one's for paper, one's for plastic, and the green is usually for organic waste, right? Food or whatever have you.
Yep, we got that here.
And I've been to these big organizations and working with individuals in those organizations, and I see all of those bins. It's merely window dressing, because all they ever do is they take all the bins. Okay, we've got all this, everybody's separated, and we all did our little part to try and make the world a little bit better. And then all the bins just get dumped into a dumpster. All together, nothing. So all the separation meant nothing, because it all goes into a dumpster. It all gets hauled off to the dump, literally. None of it is getting recycled. And these are from large institutions throughout the city of Ottawa. And they know what they're doing, and the city knows what they're doing. But it's just to make people feel better. I'm like, well, this is
it's smoke and mirrors, but you're not.
It really is, because they're not recycling any of it. And these are large institutions that produce a ton of waste, and it all just gets tossed into a landfill. And I've seen it happen. I'm not making it up. I've seen it happen. And that, when I first learned that, I was like really disheartened by it, because I thought, okay, here people are making an effort to do the right thing, because people want to do the right thing. Most people want to do the right thing. And if you make it easier for them to do it, it takes minimal amount of effort for me to go, okay, that's the metal, that's the plastic, that's the organic, and that's the trash. This is not recyclable, this product. Okay, I'll do that, no problem. But when I find out that all they're doing is taking it and tossing it all together in the same bin and hauling it off to a landfill, they're not recycling it. It was like, well, it's greenwashing to make you feel better, but they're not doing a damn thing to actually improve anything. And that I felt like somebody was, like when you learn that
it's because it costs
there's
money.
no Santa,
Yeah.
That's what it felt like when I learned for the first time that Santa was not, a real
Do
thing.
not say that on this show.
Well,
Santa has kids watching.
Santa has lots of helpers, but Santa has lots of helpers, and,
Yes, but
and zero emissions.
Yes.
Santa is carbon neutral.
Yes, he is carbon neutral. That is true.
100%.
He is indeed. Reindeer power.
Well, and don't forget they create fertilizer, because reindeer poop, grows trees and grass. And
but there's a methane issue, right?
Yes.
We can capture that methane. We can use that to power our cars.
And Santa's sleigh.
Keith, what do you think about that? That whole, we need to stop eating beef or whatever because methane is that a thing, or is it just hype? Like, what do you know about that? Because I've heard that before.
I mean, so scientists have that track, like, what are the different foods, and the GHG impacts. Beef is always the highest. Mm-hmm. There's ways to reduce the emissions from beef by adding like seaweed to the food, which I don't entirely understand.
Oh wow!
But I mean, I would say, like, try and eat less meat. A lot of people go vegetarian. Some people culturally, it's not going to work. Like, particularly, like, if you're First Nations, it's an important part of the culture. Yeah. So, but eating less is better. Mm-hmm. Try it, like, so if pork and chicken are lower than beef in terms of the amount of greenhouse gas emissions per unit. And actually you can do some pretty tasty food so part of it is also like trying out new stuff, which I confess I tend to be like, I have peanut butter toast for breakfast every morning. I'm pretty like boring kind of food guy, but like
I have coffee and about 5 cigarettes.
Had a lovely like roast vegetable soup last night, which was really good. So, but yeah, it's like that was the kind of thing, like, we encourage people to eat less meat, and I think for a lot of people just going vegetarian works. But you also gotta like make sure you're still getting everything you need by vitamin wise, etc. But that's all possible to do with a vegetarian diet.
I eat mostly wild. Like, my freezer's full of elk.
Oh wow, yeah.
And elk is really healthy and good for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wild game,
no factory farming.
No factory. I can't stand that.
Yeah.
No, I pretty much eat wild game. I hunt every year, and I hunt to eat, not hunt for
sport.
For sport, that sickens me. that guys would shoot an animal to put its
Mount it
head
on
on
it.
their wall. Like,
Then you're low GHG.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and don't forget, you gotta get the moose snare set up this weekend, right?
I told you, I told you those astronauts in Cold Lake. They believed me for a couple minutes. And then one of those
Snaring
guys kind of
moose.
like, I don't think this is a thing. I had him.
How big would a moose snare be?
It was big. It was probably 3 feet.
Jeez.
I built a moose snare, and these guys believed me that they're going to snare a moose. And these are billion-dollar people they send into space. One guy was a hunter, and he was kind of eyeballing me, and he's like, "I don't think that's a thing," but he didn't quite know. So, can't snare a moose, but I do prefer wild meat over domestic beef. I mean, I like my beef. Don't get me wrong, but my freezer is full of wild meat.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
and as I'm because I have a million food allergies, as Bridget's discovered. She's like, I'm going to make this tonight. And I'm like, no, I can't eat that. She goes, what? I'm like, well, here's the stuff I'm not allergic to. The stuff I'm not allergic to is a very short list. And a lot of the things on it, I can't stomach. Like, I don't feed me beets. Don't feed me turnip. I don't feed me carrots. I don't like them. Although carrots,
is it an allergy thing to root vegetables?
Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
wow. That's bizarre.
Raw vegetables. I can't eat raw fruits or raw vegetables. There's like 6 fruits I can eat, and they're blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, raspberries, and gooseberries, I think is the other one. That's about it for fruit that I can eat, that I don't react to. And when it comes to vegetables, I'm allergic to pretty much all of them, except for navy beans, which I don't like. So it's very difficult for me to eat. Like, I've had friends, you should go to a vegan diet. I'm like, no, I will die. I will die. I'll starve to death because I can't eat it. So my diet is beef. Go figure. Tuna. I'm not allergic to tuna. Beef, tuna, chicken, and pork is largely what my diet is, and potatoes. But here's the thing about potatoes: I can't even prepare them.
Oh,
raw
buddy,
potatoes.
there's a lot
If
of
I
ways
peel
you
them,
can cook potatoes.
Oh no, but I could buy them.
Oh, you can't prepare them.
I can't prepare them. Like, I love mashed potatoes. I can't prepare them. I can do a baked potato. That's fine. But if I have to peel them and cut them up to boil them, my hands break out. My throat I go into anaphylaxis. And I'm not making this up. It's happened, and people have seen it happen to me. So
you drink beer, though?
Oh yeah, of course I drink beer.
All right, well, you
a
built
good
up a
Irishman
tolerance
always
for
does
that,
drink
so-
beer. Oh yeah, this is coffee, by the way. It's not beer.
It's a little early for beer, but
Beer in a bear cup. About the recycling, since we were talking about it, Keith, I know that there's been this movement for manufacturers to basically now take up the recycling, be responsible for the recycling themselves somehow. I'm not quite sure exactly how that rules, because I'm sure that corporations are not going to be start having, like, Yoplait is not going to have its Yoplait tins specifically come back to the Yoplait plant where they're going to recycle them there. There's got to be some other system that's happening there. How is that new system sort of planned to work? Do you have any insights on that, and how is it better than what we have now for things that are not actually going to where they should be going?
So this is not my area of expertise. We actually have a woman named Sarah King who knows all this backwards and forwards. But the basic idea is when you make producers responsible for the cost of dealing with the garbage, they suddenly find ways to make things easier to repair, more durable, and easier to, like, dismantle, recycle, etc. Oddly enough, the design questions, like, depend on cost. And so the Europeans are way ahead of us on this. And so they brought in a bunch of rules called extended producer responsibility. But basically, it's like, you make it, it's your problem. And again, and story about being old. When I first got married, we, like, inherited my wife's, like, family's old VCR from the 80s.
Right.
And it lasted forever, and it finally died. And at that point, we had all these videotapes for our kids. You know, you have like a million of those, like, you know, Disney movies and that kind of stuff. So we wanted to get another VCR. We go in and we're trying to buy another VCR. Well, first we tried to get this one repaired, and the guy just laughed at us. He's like, you know, no one's made a part for this since 1988. And we're like, so we're buying a new VCR in the, like, 2006, 7 or whatever. And the guy was like, this is only going to last like 18 months to 3 years tops. And I was like, what? This one lasted like 25 years? Yeah, no. They and that's planned obsolescence, right? Like, they used to build a thing that would last for freaking ever.
Right.
My parents bought a fridge in 1954. And when we finally, that thing finally died because my sister she was trying to get the ice out of the freezer and she put a chisel through the Freon line.
No.
We dumped it. I was so happy because I kept having to move it, and it was made out of lead. It was one of those huge old fridges, but it just lasted forever. Now, we bought a fridge, a few years ago to replace a fridge that died, and the things things are just breaking in it. But if the companies are responsible for dealing with the problem at the end of life, they don't want to take it back, so they're going to build something that lasts longer. And for you and for all of us, that's good. That's why this is why if you can get the incentives right, rather than expecting companies to build good products going to last for a long time, when they're like, why would I build a VCR that's going to last for 20 years when I can build one that lasts for 3 years and you'll buy a new one every 3 years? So you're putting an economic incentive on them to build it right the first time or make it easy to repair. And that is actually really good for the environment. It's good for the bottom line. And, the Europeans have been doing this for a while, so we can basically just steal a bunch of their stuff. So I don't know all the details on how you do the legislation and that kind of stuff, but people have done it. And if you've ever gone to or had European friends come here, they often look at our stuff and they're like, "This is insane. Why do you have all this crap?" But there's there's big fights happening right now with Apple over
Right to repair.
repairability of stuff, right? And the John Deere is evil. How they deal with tractors. If someone tries to put a part of repairs it without taking it, they charge a fortune. I got pissed off because my stupid printer, I bought off-brand printer cartridges, and the damn thing locked up.
Yeah.
It's somehow connected to HP through the internet, and it figured out I didn't have an HP
Authorized
printer cartridge that
product,
cost 3 times as much, and so the printer stopped working.
Wow. And I buy off-brand printer cartridges for mine, and she's good to go.
It depends on how old the printer and the type too, though, because I have one like that as well, Keith. And same thing, I buy off-brand, it stops working.
Really?
Yeah. So I switched. I bought a laser.
You could do a whole show on the evils of computer printers.
Oh yeah,
that would be an entirely separate topic.
You're right. We could have a whole show on that.
But it's basically if you make the rules so that it makes sense to make things that can be repaired, that are designed to be durable, which is even better than recycling, right? Both of those things are better than recycling.
Yes.
And then at the end of their life can be taken apart and recycled. That is that's the sweet spot. So rather than you and us carefully separating into various bins, which then get all tossed into the same place, it's the corporations that made the stuff in the first place are responsible for dealing with the problem, because they're the ones who can design things better.
Yeah, so it puts the responsibility at the right spot, basically, and then gives the incentives to do that. Okay, interesting. Are there any other areas that you think that where we maybe have the incentives misaligned?
There's lots of places where we have the incentives all wrong, but to me, waste is the big one. This whole culture of use it once and throw it away, as if there's an away. There is no away. Everything goes somewhere. That's basic role of ecology. You throw it into a landfill. It's not like it's disappeared. We haven't cast it out into space.
No, we got to turn the moon into the next dump. Just to start sending all our garbage to the moon.
Yeah.
We could create a second moon just of garbage.
Well, it's kind of funny. I mean, we've got so much space junk out there now that it's starting to cause problems for new satellites, because the stuff ends up floating all around. It doesn't just disappear.
Yeah.
Although some of it falls back to Earth. So I'd for me also, I think there's a lot of things around transportation where we have the incentives all wrong, in terms of, we've designed community cities for private cars.
Right.
Again, I live in Toronto. There's huge battles over just giving traffic priority to buses and streetcars. You got a vehicle which has 100 people on it. Someone who's got a vehicle with one trying to turn left in a place you can't turn left. And it's holding everybody up. And this is where, you got to actually design the system so that the incentives are there, so it makes it easier for people to take transit. And you can get where you need to go on time because the transit is reliable. Because that's the other thing is like, if it's a crapshoot every morning, the bus is going to take 20 minutes, it's going to take 40 minutes, you don't know. Like, that's an incentive to get in your car and drive.
Yep.
I actually, because I work like 5 kilometers from my home, so it's not very far. And in rush hour traffic, there's no way you can get to my work faster by car or by transit than I can do it on my bike.
Right.
Especially now that Toronto has actually put in a bunch of decent bike lanes, so it's no longer as death-defying as it once was.
Right.
I've been biking in Toronto since 1992. It's like a lot better than it used to be. And you see a lot more people biking because they're separated bike lanes, and you can do it with greater safety. It's never perfectly safe, but it's a lot greater safety. There are so many more people on the roads. Like, it's like you basically build the stuff right, and people are going to use it because it works for them. If you're taking your life in your hands every time you like get on your bike, you're not going to get on your bike. And like, my kids don't really bike because I didn't want them.
Right.
Like, it's just
risky,
right? Like, so you don't get into that habit. They do, however, understand how the transit system works really well.
Yeah.
Well, and that's good because I'm a big proponent of public transit, and I'm happy to see that we keep expanding on our public transit here in Ottawa. And I know the Eglinton Crosstown, which has been under construction for 100 years, I think.
Deliver the damn baby.
Like, good Lord. But it's unfortunate that when Rob Ford became mayor, he killed the Transit City design that they have, because it was a really good design.
It was.
Yeah.
And he just killed it outright. And I'm like, dude, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. What is going on? And what does his brother want to do as premier? Build the new highway who actually wants this highway? There are people who want it, guaranteed. There's always somebody who wants it. But here's the thing. Most of them are developers who want to build and develop along that way to generate more profit for themselves. How many people are really going to use that highway? There's no infrastructure in the area he wants to build it. He wants to build it through the Greenbelt. It's like, it's not needed. Build more transit, expand the subway, expand on what we have, instead of, if you build it, they will come. You add more lanes, you widen the highway, it gets more cars. It's as simple as that. It's been proven time and time again. Case in point, like you just said, because they're building proper bike lane infrastructure, people are using it, and more people are using it. If you build it, they will come.
I used to work for a group called the Toronto Environmental Alliance, which is a local municipal group. I worked there 6-7 years, and we were like involved in Transit City. When that plan went down, it was a very sad day in my life because it was a lot of time gone. But like one of the reasons the Eglinton Crosstown is taking so long is because under pressure, rather than putting it, on the street and taking away a lane of traffic from cars, there's a decision to bury the thing. So it's going underground for like the main part of the downtown area.
Right.
And that is incredibly disruptive and hard and expensive. It makes it so much more expensive to bury the thing rather than, take, like on St. Clair, I live near St. Clair, basically it took away the middle lane of traffic. It's just for streetcars now. The streetcar gets you where you need to go fast. It's predictable. It's reliable. You can still move around by car. But there was a decision to take that lane of traffic away, and it just meant you could build the thing fast. It was so much cheaper. It's working. But in Eglinton, there was a decision to bury it, and that's just put the cost through the roof. Because anytime you try and like bury something in a city, like in a downtown core, for that long, it's going to be messy, right? And you're down there and you're like, oh, look, 200 years ago, somebody like built something here.
Yeah.
No one knows about because no one kept records.
You find burial sites, things like that. They discovered a burial site when they were digging the tunnel here in downtown Ottawa for the LRT. Yep. And they're like, oh, we didn't know about this before. They discovered old train tracks where they built the new train tracks that were underground. I'm like, what is this? Oh, and this was the turning circle. And over here was train tracks they had built that went from a brewery to the warehouse. So they would move the beer into the warehouse and then put it on trucks from there. It's like, nobody knew about these things. Oh.
Yep. So they just like buried them, and then when they started to build the hole to put the part of the O train that went through the downtown corridor, they just found that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez.
Nobody knew about it.
Yeah.
Nobody knew anything about it.
Yeah, but you're right. Those are it's like any home renovation project, right? You get your estimate until they put a hole in the wall and go, oh, we didn't expect to find this here. Well, that's going to cost you more.
Yeah. Well, and any project of any type of infrastructure, it's like, we go in with a budget. And it's a projection. And there's always small things, and sometimes in the case of Ottawa, big things, like when there was a sinkhole right on Rideau Street.
Yep.
And some poor guy he's a locksmith. He had his minivan, Dodge Grand Caravan, full of all his tools and locks and keys and key cutters. Well, that fell into the hole. And what did they do? They filled it with cement. And they were pouring 24 hours a day for like 3 or 4 days straight. And a friend of mine who works for one of the companies that did a lot of that work said, we couldn't get enough people to get there because they had to. I mean, it's a major thoroughfare in the city. It's right downtown. It's a stone's throw from Chateau Laurier. So they had to fix it as quickly as possible. And also, worried about things collapsing because it was flooding. Is it going to affect the tunnel underneath? Because the tunnel ran right under the street there. So little things like that. And here's the best part. I had met a woman who was a geologist. And when they did the soil samples, they had predicted, they said, most likely we will see a sinkhole during construction, and it's probably in this general, and they were not far off at all. They had predicted that this was going to happen. So there was actually part of the budget to absorb that, but it's never enough because it's still an unforeseeable. Even though you've projected this could happen, it's still an unforeseeable. And there's only so much, we might have a sinkhole. Okay, but how big is it going to be? How damaging is it going to be? What is it going to cost to repair? That is an unknown. And that happens in times like that. So when they start major infrastructure projects, you are going to discover things that you can do all your due diligence, all your projections, all your modeling, all your budgeting, and still be way off. It's just a simple fact of the matter. Yeah. And the Eglinton Crosstown is an example of that. Now, myself, I much prefer if we can have, because our LRT is just tunneled through the downtown core and then it comes out, and but the problem in Ottawa is we have this thing called snow and occasionally freezing rain. And it seems every time that happens, the train stops running. And it happens way too often. So I'm like, let's just bury the damn thing, like put it underground. And when they did the tunnel here, they didn't use tunnel boring machines. They didn't use like a round tunnel boring machine. They just had basically drilling equipment and dynamite equipment. So they were blasting and drilling, and it didn't take forever to get the tunnel drilled, but it did take a little bit longer, and they had to go a little bit deeper in places because that's we're here in bedrock here. This is going to be expensive, but if we just move it a little bit or go a little bit lower, we can get into the clay area or up, or how that works. But the problem is then you've got a tunnel that's going like this, which, as you know, steel wheels on rails don't like to go uphill.
No.
They don't grip well. And the new section that they're building out in the West End, a section of it from Tunney's pasture is in a trench, and then it goes from trench to at grade for a little bit along the Ottawa River, and then it's going to they're doing a cut and cover tunnel, but the cut and cover tunnel is in grassy area. It goes under the street, and then after that it enters into what is known as a linear park. So they're doing a cut and cover in the linear park. The park will be renewed once the system is operational, but the stations, they're going to be open air. So it's tunneled until you get to the station. They'll have the surface mount, and then it's all open air in a trench. I'm like, what? Why are the station should be covered? If the main part of the system is covered, why is the station not covered? Because Ottawa has crazy climate, insanely hot in the summer, usually insanely cold in the winter. This year being the exception, because I think it's going to 15 degrees here today, and March 15th, beware the Ides of March. That's today. So I don't understand why they're doing that. And the East End is built between the highway in the median, which I think is ridiculous because people fail to realize that in the winter when, the salt is down and there's a snowfall, that's going to get thrown onto the tracks, which is detrimental to the train. I'm like, I don't know who planned this. It's just so ridiculous.
So if you were talking, for example, if municipalities were looking to put in better mass transit, what are some of the things that you think should be looked at in this case?
So, like, I actually think Transit City was a good model where it was a lot of light rail above ground, and can move a lot of people quickly, reliably, and actually really low pollution because it's electric.
Yes.
Again, but it depends. It's really hard to. Transit's one of those things that it's hard to say, what's the standard because it looks really different in different places.
Right.
Like I grew up in Ottawa, then my parents moved out to Canada. Like Canada was weird.
Weird. Very weird. I grew up in Ottawa as well. Canada, yeah.
But
like,
so,
why?
like what's going to work in Burlington looks very different from what's going to work in downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
But you basically want to design a system that gets people, where they need to go reasonably quickly at a reasonable price, and that requires stable funding. It has to be viewed as like public infrastructure. I mean, we think nothing of paying a fortune for roads and highways, but then like for private cars. So people in their cars think like they aren't, transit is publicly subsidized. Cars aren't, where it's like, well, your car doesn't go very far unless someone has like put in all the roads and there's traffic signals and is policing it. Like there's a huge amount of money that goes into that as well.
Right.
And it's also a challenge. So it's like, you also have to like shift urban planning to allow greater density because transit works better where there's density. And I think there's actually like a significant push almost across the political spectrum for that right now, at least, recognizing we need to sort of build up existing communities rather than just sprawl. Although Doug Ford being exception, he really wants to keep sprawling.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating that he's managed to like been beaten back 3 times on the Greenbelt.
Right.
He's lost 3 times, like trying to hand that $8 billion gift to his developer buddies. And so these things are not inevitable. We can actually like try and resist them. But I do think that combination of affordable housing with mass transit that works for people is going to be like, I think if a political party can get that right, then they can actually do well on that because that's a big thing for people's concerns. And if you do it right, you also are making it a lot better for the climate because we don't have people like commuting vast distances every day in single occupancy vehicles.
You mentioned something that's of interest to me because when you mentioned the Greenbelt and how there's a combination of good journalism that helped to Doug Ford backing down, and I'm guessing the strategies would be different for urban areas and rural areas. But if you are living somewhere, and maybe you want to speak to both urban and rural, and you see a project, and you're having concerns for the environment. So, for example, the Highway 413 that's going to go through, prime agricultural land. What they're doing at Ontario Place, for example, where they're just ripping out a whole bunch of trees. First, that and maybe a whole lot more than is really needed in order to be able to do that. Somebody wants to build something somewhere, and they're just going to clear cut rather than strategically cut or something. What are things that people can do if they want to try and encourage the government to make a better decision?
Yeah. I think the tricky thing here is we actually have to, we have a long tradition of saying no to bad projects. Greenpeace, we're very used to that. The challenge right now is we also have to be able to say yes to good projects, particularly on housing and things like, increasing density. That can be tough because a lot of times people, they love their particular neighborhood. They don't want that character to change. I get it. But on the other hand, we kind of need to build up those areas. So there has been some amazing work done by like particularly the Narwhal, which is like a 3-person operation in Ontario. Denise Balkasoon, Fatima Sayed, and Emma Macintosh,
Mhm.
together with the Toronto Star. Like we've actually seen collaborations between like a nonprofit journalistic outlet with the Toronto Star, the biggest paper in the country, to expose a lot of those problems, which have helped really drive that. But it's also been, community opposition. And I think, the 413 is one of those projects we need to stop. And I think the federal government can play a role in that because they actually have some tools there to stop these types of bad projects. Because the 413 is just like, it's an excuse for sprawl. It's like a gift to developers. Provincially, the NDP was saying, well, why don't we just try and move some of the trucks onto the 407? Because there's a, mostly
Right.
empty highway there right already. Like, why not, if you're concerned about traffic? But if we're going to say no to the 413, which we should, because it's a terrible idea, the prime agricultural land is going to increase sprawl. It's going to embed all those things which we don't want to see anymore. And once you build, because when you build infrastructure, it's around for 40, 50 years.
Right.
You got to make sure when you make those decisions, you do it right, because it's really expensive to kind of go back and revise. But we've also got to get I'm sitting Dufferin and DuPont in Toronto. When I walk my dog in the morning, I see like two cranes kind of like over that way, and there's two cranes that way, and there's a couple that way. There's like a lot of construction happening.
Right.
Density, like the shopping mall that's a 10-minute walk from my house, is being completely rebuilt with like 4 massive towers. And it's going to have, tens of thousands of people. Like those are the kinds of developed projects which are good. And I, like some of my neighbors were not that keen on it because, this is a relatively low density little section, but we need to start supporting those projects as well. And we're going to have to put on more buses because, once you have, extra few tens of thousands of people move in, you got to like be able to move them down to the subway. But it's like, none of these things are easy because it's, but definitely like on things like blocking the Greenbelt projects. The key thing there is actually one of the things I think the provincial Liberal government did here well in the kind of like 2008 period was when they established the Greenbelt, they did a lot of consultation. They got a lot of community buy-in. They also established a Greenbelt Foundation, which basically has spent years sort of like making sure people love the Greenbelt and because by connecting people to it.
Right.
So that they have that connection, they sort of see the value. And so like a lot of the opposition to the sort of attempt to intrude into the Greenbelt didn't come, like, it wasn't just downtown Toronto. It was actually mayors in the 905.
Right.
We're saying no. Like, Hamilton was saying like, well, we'll build up, like, let's, we'll build up our community rather than sprawling more. And that was a pretty potent pushback on the Conservatives. I think that's why they flinched because, and then also, with the help of the Narwhal and the Star sort of, and other media outlets sort of showing like, okay, who's really benefiting from this? Is this, who is this really good for? Oh, it's good for like a few people who all happen to have shown up at Doug Ford's daughter's stag and doe with envelopes of cash.
Right.
Yeah.
The
quid pro quo.
So it looks that way.
Yeah.
But the opposition to that was sort of built at a community level because people had that connection to the Greenbelt. They wanted to protect it. But we need to sort of also build that up for supporting those good projects, which is also true on like the energy front. We need to like have that support for wind and solar projects because, change is always challenging.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to change a lot of things to be able to keep what we have. Because the choice right now is no longer change or no change. It's either change we do to avoid climate change through better transit, different energy system, or the changes that come from all of the things that climate change will exacerbate, the extreme weather, the wildfires. It's not like change or no change. It's what kind of change.
Change is coming regardless.
Yeah, it's happening.
Yeah. It's not a, you always say like, the status quo is not an option. Literally in this case, like physically, in terms of physics and chemistry, it is not an option.
Yeah.
Right.
And we can choose like what kind. We have some influence over what kinds of changes, and that's we have to do what's best for, people and nature, because those are actually aligned right now when it comes to climate.
Actually, you know what? When you framed it that way, that's the way I've never heard it framed before, actually. And I think that's particularly effective. My background's in communications. And, change is coming one way or another. Choose your change. Right. Is it? Yes.
So
like this. Your neighborhood changes because a forest, a fire went wild and raised the whole neighborhood. That's a change. Or it's changed because, you know what, you decided to, densify and, bring in more public transit and bring in better building codes and, change the way that we recycle and have a better, better climate incentives for better choices and whatnot. And, we're changing the cars that we drive and driving, riding bikes more and making better food choices. And, the hundreds of little decisions that all add up, every jot and tittle adds to the pot, as we say, that you all made to, but change is coming one way or another, regardless. And, do you just want life to just happen to you, or do you want to, try to have some say in what's going on in your life?
Yeah. So John Holdren, who was science advisor to Obama in his first term, he gave this speech, which really stuck with me, where he said, okay, look, we're going to do 3 things about climate change. There's only 3 things we can do, and there's the 3 things that we are going to do to varying degrees. We can try and reduce greenhouse gas emissions so that the planet doesn't warm as fast as quickly.
Right.
We can try and adapt to changes that we can't avoid, although some changes you can't adapt to. And that can be things like, making sure that the forest doesn't go right up to the neighborhoods anymore, so that if there's wildfires, it doesn't get burned down. Having different rules so your roof doesn't blow off in stronger storms. Better floodwater controls, all those types of things. So you can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, adapt to some of the changes, and that's usually the debate. But are we going to do those 2 things? He says the third thing we can do is we can suffer. Because if the less we do of number 1 and number 2 is actually a choice to maximize number 3, suffering.
Right.
That's the actual policy option here. And so when I come back to that Polyev rally,
right,
when I showed up there, it's the choice to not talk about this, to not allow anyone to talk about it, is actually a choice to maximize suffering. That is the choice that is actually being made here. And that is unacceptable to me, and I think to a lot of Canadians.
I agree. But it's not being presented that way. No. Interesting. That's a good thought to leave this on. Keith, thank you so very much for taking some time to join us today to just speak about your experience and give us some insights into what we should be looking for in terms of better climate policy in order to make a better informed decision when it comes time to cast our votes.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been fun.
Yes, and if ever you have something that comes up in the news or a topic that you think that our audience should know, please know that you're welcome here anytime.
Anytime, sir.
We would love to have you back. Right. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. My best to your family.
Bye.
Right. And Kits, of course, as you may have noticed over the course of the chat, Army Chris had to punch out. So thank you to him also for having joined us today to talk a little bit.
I love Fridays when we can get a few people in to come and chat with us, right? Because it really moves the conversation forward, and we all learn something as a result. I mean, I learned a few things today that I didn't know before. And my goal is to try and learn something new each and every day of my life. I'm pretty successful at it, surprisingly, despite what many people would think. I'm actually pretty successful at learning something new every day because I want to, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Grizzly, I think we have a show.
I believe we do, sir. Do you have a couple of things you need to attend to today?
No, not specifically.
Oh, okay. I was just curious. Just curious.
Not specifically. There are other things I could talk about, but it just seems to be a little bit of a weird transition based on what we've done so far today.
Okay, no, fair enough. I understand. Yeah. So we'll just put a bow on it for now, and we can visit some things on Monday. And don't forget, folks, tomorrow we will be having a virtual pubcast, our monthly pubcast, but it'll be a virtual one tomorrow because it's the day before St. Patrick's. So every pub in town is going to be a zoo. So yeah, it'll be a virtual pubcast. I'm going to kick things off probably around 3:30, quarter to 4-ish. Mr. Beaver will join in shortly thereafter. We've got a few guests that we've lined up to join us for the day to have a chat and maybe raise a pint of Guinness and cheer the Feast of St. Patrick, as I like to call it. And yeah, so that's tomorrow around 3:45, 4 o'clock ish. I'm going to go into the pub, shoot a little bit of footage, and have a pint of Guinness, because St. Patrick's, you got to do it. And yeah, we'll have a good afternoon.
All right, good stuff. I guess a couple of things I could briefly mention, because they were big deals, but we didn't get to touch on them. Two of the two employees that work with GC Strategies have been called to the House to testify. They testified over the past 2 days. Christian Firth is the first one. The second one's last name is Anderson. I can't remember. Darren Anthony, sorry. Both came in. Darren Anthony's testimony was the less interesting one of the two, because his claims are basically that, he handled some administrative stuff, but not that much else with regard to the project. Christian Firth was a lot more combative. With regard to that, having accused the work of the committee and certain MPs who are... There's a bit of this that's reminding me a lot of what happened with We Charity, how basically they destroyed a good charitable organization. Not a perfect one, of course. There were always issues, but a good organization that was doing good work just for the sport of it. And it seems that something like this might be going on here too. Christian Firth had complained that, he's received death threats and has needed additional security and all that kind of stuff. And they've frozen his ability to be able to get new contracts, which, of course, while this is going on, makes it difficult for them to do their business.
And let's even though there's a lot of money involved, it is a small business.
Yep.
So and what happened to the small business when Pierre Poilievre doesn't like it? He works to destroy you. Remember the Donut Gate?
Yes, or the brewery.
The brewery, the Donut Gate.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to paint the picture of this man will destroy you if it will benefit him.
Mm-hmm. Now, both of them had, this committee had been trying to get both of them to appear for a good long while. They refused invitations twice, once in November, once in February, citing concerns for their mental health. I'm guessing that if they're getting death threats and they have a whole section of the government, and when I say the government in this sense, I don't mean just the party in power. I mean everybody in Parliament. Because the entire function of government, they have one party within the government dedicating the full weight of the resources of the state to trying to malign and destroy their reputation. That would cause people to have a couple of mental health anxieties.
Oh, yeah.
Issues to go on. So they twice refused, which is why the group had passed that agreement in committee that if they didn't show up this time, they would issue a warrant. Both of them have appeared through video and not in person to testify over these past 2 days. Remember that the Auditor General of Canada, Karen Hogan, said in a report that she could not figure out how or why it was that GC Strategies was retained to do the work, nor could she find or identify which government official had actually chosen the company, given the lack of documentation there. Christian Firth made the point that from their perspective, GC Strategies' perspective, that all the documentation was there and filed, and that the issue might be more with government record keeping, in this case CBSA record keeping, not the Prime Minister's office or overall government of Canada record keeping. There seems to be some issues at CBSA specifically with the manner in which that contract has been managed and with the manner in which they have kept documentation, which was not up to standard, if we are to believe the Auditor General, and we have no reason to not. So there's some work that needs to be done there, but that's that's a public servant issue.
Yes.
That's a public service issue. That's not a government issue. And I know that everything, the buck stops at the government, and the buck stops with the minister and that type of stuff, and that matters. But that is, once you get to that level of departmental work, if receipts are not being kept the same way and right way, or documentation is not being kept the right way, that's a couple steps removed from the people for whom we vote. Specifically, doesn't mean that they don't have ultimate responsibility and don't need to look into that and establish changes, but you can't necessarily also say that it's their fault. Because it's not like the Greenbelt thing where the decision was brought right into the minister's office and they hired a specific staffer to do that specific thing in such a way that they could say, hey, we didn't see anything. This is, the government system that already existed, and the contract was being managed by a government department and was managed by a unit in that department. There was something in that unit that made it such that records were not properly kept. So there definitely needs to be some work that's done there. But you got to put the blame where it lies at some point. There was also a claim that $19 billion was received by GC Strategies to do that. Firth said that it was more like $11 billion. And the other 8 possibly being remuneration for other work it was doing on other projects at the time. They have also received 3 other contracts, I believe, since, according to reports on CBC, but it seems that right now they have been barred or blocked from getting more contracts.
Interesting.
And Firth accused members on the committee of saying out loud that he was a fraudster, and encouraged all departments to refer matters that the committee had, basically the Conservatives on the committee, but the committee itself tried to get all government departments with which GC Strategies had done business to refer all their activities to the RCMP in order to get an investigation going, because there is an investigation going in, RCMP investigation into, I believe, GC and into the unit itself at the CBSA where this was done. Again, not an investigation into the government itself, but into the governance of this specific program. And it seems that at committee, when Firth decided to take this opportunity to turn the tables on them and bring their behavior to light, his questioners did not take too kindly at all to having their motives challenged by the witness. But of course, they had no problem challenging the motives of the witness, trying to depict him as someone who's committed fraud and have been doing this for a long time in the press, even trying to frame him as being a criminal by issuing that warrant for him to appear. So, and it seems that some of the members of the committee are now trying to say that Firth was evasive, and they're trying to use once again the full power of the weight of the state to find him specifically in contempt of Parliament.
Well,
yeah. So, who's telling the truth here? Of course, we do not know, because we don't have the documentation, we don't have access to it. But it does seem that we do have a member of the business community saying, hey, you guys are pretty much setting me up for a fall here. Which we would normally first have doubts about the veracity of such a claim, much like, the person, as we talked about yesterday, we're talking about the use of performance-enhancing drugs, where people turn around and go, no, it wasn't me. Somebody must have spiked my drink. And, maybe if we had not had the Ben Johnson and Lance Armstrong incidents, we'd be more inclined to believe that. But now there's a whole section of people that goes, yeah, they always deny that they did it at first. And then a couple of years later, oh, well, yeah, you caught me. So it's that type of attitude here going on with this. Maybe we would be a little more inclined to believe you, Conservative Party of Canada, that the problem is actually with the contractor, except you just pulled that wee thing on us, and then the SNC Lavalin thing on us that you tried to make us believe was criminal and technically wasn't. And so, there's only so many times that you can run to a microphone and say, this person is a criminal
Mhm.
to various different people,
Oh, yeah.
and there ultimately not being any investigations or charges or whatnot before people start thinking, oh yeah, everyone's a criminal to you, and roll your eyes.
The boy who cried wolf, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And let's remember the story of the boy who cried wolf is eventually there was indeed a wolf.
And yeah, nobody was listening.
It's not that there wasn't a wolf.
My good God, my dog farts a lot. Oh my God, Lola, oh my God, Jesus. 80-pound pup. Come here, sweetheart. Sorry, that's
Right. I don't want to regulate what's happening in the chat, but it would be really nice if we got off the Dina and Joe conversation.
yeah. It's just, can we just put that to bed, please?
We're not going to agree.
No, so let's just leave it.
Clearly.
Yeah.
So we can just respectfully disagree.
Yeah.
It surfaces just way too often and makes the chat environment unpleasant for everyone else who has to watch it.
And we don't want that.
Like this, where we want to create an environment where everybody can come and we can hug it out at the end. It's, and we're talking about environmental stuff here.
Yeah.
It's not like just, if you have your side and if you have your friends and you have your cause and you believe in it, that's great and whatnot. But it doesn't, this, constant like having to butt heads and making fellow kits that are here trying to be framing them as the bad guy or the bad girl in this. There are people that are going to believe what they believe about Karima, regardless of what the truth are. There are people that are going to believe what they want about Dina, regardless of the truth. There are people that are going to believe things about certain kits who have had run-ins, either positive or negative, with any of these people involved. Regardless, your personal experiences with these people are true and real for you. Yes, and I don't think it's the place of others to have opinions on the personal experiences of others. If one person's experience of someone is negative, they are allowed to have that, and they should not be considered a bad person for saying it. If one person's experience with someone that someone else had a bad experience with is positive, they're not a bad person for having said that as well. But the constant circulating and coming back to the same issue and never getting any resolve, because there will be no resolution. Your experience was positive, your experience was negative. And that's okay that you both had two different experiences of the same person. If I have a negative experience with someone and somebody says my experience of them was good, the fact that their experience of them was good is not going to change my opinion on my experience of them.
Exactly.
I'll be happy for you that your experience with them was good, but mine was still negative. And there's no amount of back and forth that's going to change either of our opinions on that. So those are the types of things where we can actually say, let's agree to disagree about what we think about this person or what we think about this movement and move on in order to be able to make room for other discussions and not just always having to rehash the same ones all over again. It's just, it's like we're trying to create a little space in our chat, where we can exchange our ideas and our experience and our thoughts, and for other people to recognize them as valid, even though that's not necessarily true for them. So if we can try to have the conversation in that way, and maybe even, and I know it's a lot to ask, but if we can take that spirit of honoring, or at least honoring, if not honoring, but acknowledging as being true for you, your experience, out into the broader world. That would be great, because I sometimes see this conversation continue offline in forums that are not this one, where I see people that I care about on both sides. of this. Doing things to each other and saying things about each other in other forums that could be kinder. Let's put it that way. Could be kinder. I just don't want to create an environment here where we're bringing stuff from the outside. And as Kid Cassie's saying here, it's uncomfortable for those of us in the chat that aren't privy to the outside arguments and want to chat about the topic of the show. And we would like to, have this, it's okay to have history with people, right? It's okay to have history with organizations, but like I said, our personal experiences are ours and we share them, and, and it should be that. It's like, wow, I'm sorry you've had that experience, like this. I recognize you've had that experience. Mine was different. Oh, okay. Well, yours is different. I'm glad you had that different experience. And that's really where it should end at that point, because there's really nothing to be gained of trying to convince someone who's had a bad experience or someone who's had a good experience that the person that they've had that experience with is the complete opposite of the experience they've had of them. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't work. It goes nowhere. All right. So just not an admonishment, but more like a gentle encouragement on our part to try to keep this one little corner on the web where we can
be civil.
Well, not just civil, just because I'm pretty sure we're being civil.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that at some point there's nothing more to be gained,
right,
by having the conversation over and over again, and the people who are active in this way are going to continue being active, and we are going to be able we're going to have to talk about these incidents and the people involved with them as things progress during time. And I don't want to necessarily create a situation where every mention of them or something connected to something to them becomes an invitation or a pretext to have the same old conversation all over again.
Right.
Exactly, to get on the hamster wheel. The hamster wheel. So just, I think we all know where we stand when it comes to this particular thing, and we should just honor everyone's experience with it, acknowledge it as being real for them, and there's nothing to be gained in convincing someone that their experience of someone else is wrong. There just isn't, and that's regardless of what side of it you're on. Regardless of what side of it you're on, which is one of the reasons why I often talk about, approving of tactics and strategies as opposed to approving of people.
Right.
Because we all make wise and less than wise decisions in that which is important to us and what we want to pursue. And, and even if we make a wise decision, it could still be viewed by someone who's equally well-meaning and who cares about the issue just as much as being unwise, because it's something they would not have done or they would not have chosen for themselves. But it doesn't mean that it's illegitimate, right? Just because you wouldn't have chosen it for yourself, or well, that's something I wouldn't have done, doesn't mean it's something that was wrong to do. It just means it's something that you wouldn't have done, right? It's not your internal hardwiring doesn't work that way. But it doesn't mean that it's wrong if somebody else's does. So if we were all the same, we would get tired of talking to each other because we'd be very, very bored. So let's just try to share our personal experiences, acknowledge that everybody's had the experience, and if we agree to disagree respectfully, then we hug it out at the end of the show. That would be absolutely fantastic, and we would love that. But the more we can keep the conversation in the chat related to the topics that we are discussing here on the show, or of course whatever else that you do want to describe, talk about it in the chat. It doesn't strictly have to be that, but the more we can keep it to it, because it gives us something to us too. We get to pick from that and bring it into the episode and get our guests when we have them to respond to that. Or sometimes it gives us thoughts about stuff that we forgot that we can add in to improve the content and the quality and the amount of information that we're giving, because you do contribute to the show a lot, kids, and we really do appreciate it. And it's it makes me happy that you care enough about the show
Yes.
like this to want to be able to contribute things that are material to it, and things that we can, and things that we don't know, because we're only two of us and we can't read and see everything. And we rely on you a lot to bring us to check our blind spots for us as well.
And we're going to make mistakes because we're only human.
Yeah. So just like you said, we talk about be kind to and gentle with yourselves. Let's do that in the chat as well. Right.
Works for
And
me.
I'm sure that how would I put it? On chat, it's all written, right? So you don't have the benefit of tone.
Mhm.
You don't have the benefit of inflection. And
There's no
whatever it
nuance.
is that
Nuance
you
is
are
completely lost.
exactly, and whatever it is that you're showing up with, like if 10 minutes or 15 minutes before coming onto the show, you had a bad experience, something else, that will make it more likely that if you're reading something that doesn't have any tone or inflection, we're reading it with darker colored glasses rather than rosier colored glasses.
Mhm.
And then he goes, what do you mean by that? And it's like, and that might not have been intended. So one of the things that I ask people is to not first assume the worst of others. And if there's something that you're reading on the chat, somebody's saying that that's maybe you're maybe taking it the wrong way, maybe to first assume that maybe the intent was not to have said it in the wrong way. And the question, I don't understand what you mean. Could you please reformulate it, or could you please explain what you meant by that? Is a valid question, as opposed to assuming. Take some time to check that somebody actually intended to be offending, because sometimes we just take shortcuts when we write. There's certain words that we leave out, more diplomatic, the pleasantries, and and things get missed, and then we first assume things about the intent of others that weren't there in the first place. So some of these conversations are probably better had in person, or at least voice to voice, so you can have the benefit of all the color and texture that goes with language that gets that disappears from it when you are just doing it on text. Kit, James, and I have that issue often. When we're just writing to each other, that it's like. So I was like, "Why are you being so surly?" It's like, I'm not being surly. I thought we were having a great conversation. It was like, "Oh, I'm perceiving you as being surly." It's like, "Well, no, I wasn't being surly at all." "Oh, sorry, my bad." But we
happens.
respond to what we perceive, and not necessarily sometimes what was actually intended. So take some time to check in with the person that you're writing to be sure that we're not misassuming on intent as well.
Well, somebody earlier in the chat from a paired channel from somewhere, I don't know where, just started to, and I'm like, bald much? What kind of shampoo do you use, Paul? I'm like, are you trying to make fun of me? Because we're all well aware that I shave my head.
Yeah. But that's like but like if it's someone that you don't know, you don't have a track record with, it's like, okay, is this good-natured ribbon?
Yeah, and you can't tell.
Are you just busting my balls, or
I
are
just
you trying
laughed
to
it
get at
off.
me? Are you trying to goad me? Are you trying? But it could be taken both ways. And again, if you come like yesterday when you came in with a migraine, maybe yesterday you just would not be having it. But today you're in a better mood, and somebody's just busting my balls.
And it doesn't bother me. I know I'm bald. I shave my head.
Yeah. But it's what you bring, what you bring to the party matters. So yeah, like I said, just more of a gentle nudge an incentive towards wanting to create a space where we can have that fulsome discussion like that. Because, you are the best damn fam in all of podcasting. And, I'm a little selfish. I want to keep you all here. I don't want anybody feeling that they have to go away because, they feel that the chat is not a welcoming environment. All right. So, as somebody said one day on the chat, new rule: after every show, we hug it out.
Yes.
Here on the chat.
Don't go to bed on an argument.
Yeah, especially don't do that. That's not good. There's other things going on in the world, as we mentioned as well. There's that thing of Can. There's stuff going on in Haiti. The government's involved with that.
I have a short video clip I think you might like of the Prime Minister talking to union labor.
Oh, okay. Let's do that.
Let's take a look at this because I think it's... Well, let's just watch and then we'll move on. Oh, now it won't play.
Try and reboot it one more time.
Yeah.
Yes. Kit Aina makes a great comment here. I think we also need to keep in mind neural diversity as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a very, very good point. I'm glad you raised it.
You're absolutely right. And your expression, for those of us, I have ADHD, which I think is defined as neurodiversity. Why does this thing keep defaulting to this?
Ina. Sorry, Ina.
Yeah.
We have an Ina who contributes to the show. We have an Ina, and I keep on mixing up your names. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, there's two. Yeah. Sorry about that. Let's try this video clip again. I think it's going to work this time. Hang on. Here we go. Oh, for Christ's sake.
Tech will not cooperate. All right.
It's on the Twitter, so Elon, get your shit together.
All right. Well, I think that's probably our cue then, Mr. Grizzly.
So.
Let's consider this a show. Kits and Cubs, we hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Daily Beaver Morning Show because we love making this for you. Remember, sharing is caring, so please tell your peeps and poops all about us because word of mouth is priceless. If you would like to make sure that you do not miss an episode, you do not have... Let's try that again. You do not have to, thanks to the Ray Girl, the fabulous, fierce, and fiery Ray Girl, who has sponsored our pod page. So if you scan that QR code that is underneath my chin, or use the lovely digits on your fingers, or your voice prompt, lovely digits on your fingers, lovely digits on your hands, or use our voice prompt. I don't know how to segue out of dad mode.
I got nothing.
You could go to podpage.com/the True North Eager Beaver, lowercase letters with a hyphen between each one of those words, and that will bring you to our pod page site. And if you subscribe there, when we have something fresh off the bandwidth, it will come directly to you. If you'd like to support us in other ways, make like Kit Elaine and go to the True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube channel, where you can click like, share, and subscribe. And that way, you help us a lot. And yesterday we had asked people to help us as we get to $6.75 a week. And I know that when we started the show, we were at $6.74. So thank you so very much. And hopefully that will continue, and we will meet our goal of reaching 700 before the end of next week. So please tell everyone about us. And if you would like to help us in other ways, the QR code that's appearing right by Mr. Grizzly's head over there, well, that brings you to our coffee page, where you will find the Emergency Hydration Fund here at the Beaver Lodge, where you can contribute to making sure that we have staff that can help us make that show. Guinness, hot chocolate, coffee, and Caesar are all waiting for us, and they deserve a raise. So, because they have been definitely making sure that we put out some decent product for you. So if you can make a little contribution there, we would appreciate that. Everything that you donate to us is very much very much cherished and appreciated. But as always, like we say, the gift we cherish most is the gift of your attention. If you would like to write to us, truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com. And if you happen to be listening to us on Apple podcasts, reviews and stars are greatly appreciated. Also, for those of us who listen to us on Google Podcasts, it seems that that service is going to be discontinued relatively soon as well. So please make plans to migrate to another platform when you have the opportunity, to make sure that you do not miss out on our offerings. Because democracy is something that you do, please write those letters to your MPs, your MPPs, your senators, and to your media. In the spirit of the show, ask for more complete coverage on what is going on with regard to climate. So, for example, hey, stop talking about the climate regulatory fee without talking about the rebate. Stop referring to it as a tax when it's a regulatory fee. Talk to us about counterfactual, that if we're not doing this, if we're not putting money into a carbon regulation, then what happens? How could that cost us otherwise? And other things of the sort. Or just basically explaining how it is that, charging a carbon regulatory fee to raise the price of certain things actually contributes, when it comes to consumer behavior, to people making better choices. All these discussions are important, and a lot of them get evacuated from the general discussion in order to get to the shortcuts or the soundbite or the sensational bit of the day. So if you want more responsible reporting, you need to ask for them. You need to know that, let them know that you're paying attention and that you notice that it's not there and that you would like it. So please write those letters. It really, really, really does matter, and they do make a difference. They very much do. From the Beaver Lodge, this is your Eager Beaver saying, it could be a tough world out there, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself. Mr. Grizzly, do you have some words of wisdom for us, please? Oh, I think Mr. Grizzly took his ears out. So we're just wondering, Mr. Grizzly, if you had some words of wisdom for the kids before we go.
Sorry, in a meeting.
All right. I'm going to guess that that's a no in that case. Sorry, I'm in a meeting. I might have to stretch a little bit until Mr. Grizzly is able to get the phones back in so that we can end the show. So since we are doing that, do I need to stretch, Mr. Grizzly? It seems I do. Okay. So I will do that then. Sorry, kids. I'm not sticking the dismount today. But since we have some time to talk about other news, we'll talk a little bit then about what's going on in Haiti. Gangs in Haiti have seized control of the airport, and it was all with an effort to get the current president, Ariel Henry, to resign. Gangs had also seized control of about 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince, and have been creating pretty much a state of anarchy for about 11 or 12 days now, attacking police and government infrastructure, leaving hundreds of people dead, injured, or kidnapped. Ariel Henry, the recently I guess, or soon to be resigned president, took over 3 years ago after the former president was assassinated. I think it was Jovenel Moïse was his name. And he had fled to Puerto Rico over the past few days in an effort to try to seek international help with the situation. He had negotiated a 1,000-strong police force that would be arriving from Kenya to try and help with that. It seems that there were some delays with regard to that, or some thought that it might not go through. It seems that the Secretary of State of the United States, Mr. Blinken, has had talks with Kenyan officials to try to make sure to keep that initiative going. The leader of the gangs, some guy that goes by the nickname Barbecue, has seemed to have made a commitment that the gangs there would express, more than express, but would oppose violently any intervention or international intervention to try and reestablish order, anything that was not organic coming from the people. And That's one of the situations in Haiti, unfortunately, has been for the longest time. The people of Haiti have not been allowed to choose their own leader. There's always been some type of interference or influence from a foreign country somewhere. The people in the capital and throughout the nation are desperate for food and water. Officials have, from many countries, have been meeting in Jamaica over the past week. Canadian officials have been there. That they've been taking part of an emergency meeting that was called by the Irfan Ali, who's the president of Guyana. Bob Ray, who is our ambassador to the UN, had gone to those meetings and was trying to help there, joining leaders from the United States, France, and many other Caribbean nations. The installed president, Ariel Henry, has announced that he would resign if a transitional presidential council could be struck in such a way as to elect a new president. It seems to be that there's some objection from the gangs ruling the island nation at the moment with regards to that as well. They're particularly not keen on that type of initiative. And according to Bo of the Fifth Column, who we listen to a lot and take a lot of information from, it seems that the most important thing the international community could do for Haiti at this time is to indeed allow them to actually choose their next leader from a slate of candidates that is also of their own choosing, and to do so freely. The United States has sent in some Marines to get non-essential staff out of its embassy. I believe Canada
Everybody's been pulled. Everybody.
has
Even
been
essential.
has been pulling staff from the embassy as well. So I'm not quite exactly sure what the resolution is going to be there, and how we get out of that situation, because the gangs do very much seem to be in control of the country, and there does seem to be a pretty much total state of anarchy at the moment. But the current situation also can't be allowed to persist, so I'm not smart enough to know what the solution is. There are much brighter minds than me out there trying to figure it out, and so far they seem to be pretty much at a loss as well. All right, Mr. Grizzly, if you're not in a meeting and you do have words of wisdom, that would be great. If not,
I'm blank. Sorry, I'm trying to solve a technical issue here at the same time.
No worries.
At work,
No
so
worries.
I'm just drawing a blank. Sorry.
Then, Kits, I will wish you have a wonderful weekend, and my words of wisdom would be take some time this weekend to do something for yourself that brings you joy. Doesn't have to be expensive. Just has to be something that brings you joy.
Okay.
Connect with your sense of joy. Mr. Grizzly, please cue the rooster.
Trying.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and The Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music. Right, and before we go, still wishing good luck to all the people competing at the Ontario Senior Curling Championships. Kit, Michael, gave me a little bit of an update the other day, and our local team, after 3 matches, were at the top of the leaderboard at a 3-0 record. So go Team Heron. And of course, this weekend in Sydney, Nova Scotia, please tune on your TV sets at some moment and cheer for Team Homan, Team Canada, at the World Women's Curling Championships. bringing a stellar performance at the national championships, where she went in 8-0 in the round robin and won all the playoff matches. So I think it was 11 wins in a row in order to get the title. And let's hope they bring that winning streak to the World Championships, and that we come home with some hardware, preferably gold.
Cool.
But any hardware will do, because there's some stiff competition. But the most important part is to have fun.
Yes.
All right.
Let's see if
Have
I can
a great
try
weekend,
this.
everyone.
I think this is going to work this time.
Okay.
I'm going to try it one more time. One last time.
One more time.
Unions have always been at the heart of how we've built this country.
Right on.
And they will continue to be. But you know how hard you've had to fight for it over decades and generations. You know how much you've had to push on this. For the past 8 years, you have had a government that has been on your side, that understands that the fight that you have is not just for yourselves, but it's for Canada. And that's why I'm so glad to be here today to say thank you to all of you for everything you've done in this fight, and to charge you up for the continued fights, not just over the coming years, but over the coming decades, as every day we position ourselves to make Canada a better place for all of us here now and for future generations. Unions have always...
I thought that was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool. And the people there seem to be rather receptive to it.
Yeah. Go figure.
There you go.
And this government has shown that they are actually on the side of unions.
Yes, they are walking the talk, because they have
really
not enacted back to work legislation. They've allowed things to
negotiate at the bargaining table. Yeah.
Like this. And our current minister, Seamus O'Regan, almost every time he's asked, are you going to force them back to work, looks at people like they're insane.
Yeah, he's like, no, we're not doing that. That would diminish the bargaining power of the union. No, we're not doing that. I'm like, they actually are walking the talk. And that's something that we rarely ever see from any politician of any stripe. So, you can hate the man as much as you want for whatever reason, but at least have a valid one. And don't say, well, I don't like his socks or the blackface thing or whatever. Don't do any of that. Hate him for his policies. And then tell me how his policies have harmed you. And I'll be waiting a long time to hear that.
All right. Have a smashing weekend, kids.
We'll see you tomorrow around 4 p.m.
Good persistence.
Thank you. See you 4 p.m. tomorrow.